The reason to hunt the mages was simple. Prove the theory he formed in the penalty zone. Knights surged at him. Jinwoo vaulted off a shoulder, rose above the press, and scanned the boss room. Where are the mages? There, not far away, a lone caster. Just as I thought. Back when the knights had him pinned, and only his arm could move, he'd glimpsed something odd through the gaps. A mage chanting nonstop. Nothing strange about chanting, except no spells ever landed. Every hit he'd taken came from knights. The only time a spell completed was Eyes of Detection, which broke his stealth, and when that happened, every nearby knight froze. At first he assumed they'd lost their target. Later, cutting down centipedes in the penalty zone, he had a better thought. After his 8th kill, he leveled. Level up. HP and MP refilled. Then the inconsistency hit him. If I can level here so easily, why didn't I level even once in that room? The system never said leveling was disabled, only that healing on level up was. He climbed 5 levels on the way to this boss room. Yet during the class change trial, he gained nothing despite 6 minutes of fighting and 100 kills. Mages chanting without casting. Knights that gave no experience. Combine the two and a new possibility appears. The knights were fakes, puppets sustained by the mage's channeling. When Eyes of Detection fired, the mage paused, so the puppet stopped. If I'm right, he sprinted toward the caster, using helms and shoulders as stepping stones. The mage panicked and sped up the chant. The surrounding knights shifted to screen it. Got you. He dropped in front of the mage and drove his dagger home. Vital points targeting. Stab. The robe collapsed in a black smoke. You have defeated a mage. All around him, the charging knights crumpled like cut strings, empty armor clattering to the floor. That's it. Knights weren't the threat. The mages were. The ground rumbled. Fresh armor closed in on every side. There were more mages hidden, driving new waves. A sword whistled. Jinwoo's right hand blurred. Slice. Front ranks fell in halves. The Night Killer bit through plate like paper, worth everyone the 2.8 million gold he'd paid. The saw-edged blade wasn't the only reason. The weapon thrummed with power exactly as its description promised, designed for use against knights. Store gear is better than I thought. Don't sleep on gold. He pushed aside the thought and kept moving. Swish. Slice. For every suit he dropped, more stepped in. This won't end until the casters go down. He vaulted off a headless body. Stealth. He didn't need to hide. He needed to force a response. A mage has used skill. Eyes of Detection. Shrill beeps pinged from several directions. He traced each eye mark across the room. 5 mages. He locked onto the nearest. Knights rushed to wall off. His left hand snapped forward. Swish. The poison fong of Kasaka drilled the caster's brow. You have acquired skill. Dagger throw. You have defeated a mage. Armor collapsed again. For left. He ran, boots drumming across helmets, then reached for the dagger he'd just hurled. Ruler's reach. The blade ripped free of the floor and flew to his palm like iron to a magnet. Yes, he arrived at the next caster and cleaved it cleanly before the knights could react. More metal hit stone. Fewer than half the original suits remained. 3 left. Sensing danger, the remaining mages grouped up and pulled their puppets tight around them. Their chanting rose together, low and ugly. Crack, creak. Knight after knight crumpled inward, compressed as if fed into a crusher, then fused into a single hulking metal golem that glared down at him. Whoa. Okay, that's nasty, he admitted, feeling the weight of its presence, and no fear at all. Thud, thud, thud. Each step shook the floor. Whoosh. He dipped under a fist. Kaboom. A pillar behind him exploded into rubble. Serious power. But I don't need to break you. The golem laced its hands and raised them high. Jinwoo didn't retreat. He dashed in, dropped to a slide, and shot between its legs. By the time the golem started to turn, he was already on the mages, 3 robed figures still chanting, totally exposed. Checkmate. His daggers flashed. 3 more plumes of smoke. Behind him, the giant came apart, collapsing into a rain of empty parts. He stayed ready, listening for the next threat. Tearing, he swallowed. Class change quest complete. All monsters in the chamber have been defeated. Your class will now be determined. With sufficient advancement points, a higher tier class may be granted. Only then did he breathe out. Rough fight. If he'd clung to the immediate return stone, he would have missed the trick and kept thinking about escape. Losing it forced him to solve the room and win. Time to collect. He glanced at the timer. 4 hours, 29 minutes, and 16 seconds. Frozen. He'd endured nearly 4.5 hours. And not just endured. He'd wiped the place. His pulse quickened. A suitable class will be bestowed after a full review of your past actions. Good. That meant no bizarre mismatch later. Where the player stands, the hidden breath of an assassin lingers. The paths the player has walked are lined with bodies, and the scent of blood is heavy. Cold words, but accurate. He'd farmed until the levels stopped moving, cleared every hidden monster he could find, and even clashed with hunters when he had to. Assassin. Corpses. Blood. So it's assassin after all. The player thirsts for power, trusts no comrades, and carves a new road alone. He nodded. Hard to trust anyone so far. Why bring that up in a class choice, though? The system continued. Your hunger for strength is so intense, it summons the spirits of the dead. An army of the fallen, obeying only you, will open the way without aid. He blinked. An army of the dead? Wait. Before he could protest, the verdict landed in the usual flat tone. Your class has been set to Necromancer. What the hell? What was that? An open-handed slap from the system. Everything had lined up for Assassin, so why did Necromancer pop out of nowhere? Jinwoo stared at the prompt, rubbed his eyes, stared again. Your class has been set as Necromancer. Still there. Still wrong. Disbelief gave way to irritation. I never put a single point into intelligence. How does this make sense? From day one, he'd been a close-quarters fighter. Daggers, not staves. All his skills screamed assassin. A magic class, worse, a necromancer, fit him about as well as a robe on a tank. A pale mage trailed by shambling corpses? That wasn't him. He exhaled. Calm down. Panic never helped. Cool thinking was his real weapon. Denial, then anger. What came next, bargaining? Compromise? He almost laughed. It's not like he could haggle with the system. Okay, upside. A necromancer could field an army. Downside. That army was skeletons and rotting corpses. March that down a street, and the country would lose its mind. Hunters already scared people. A man commanding the dead would be a new level of nightmare. Fit issues aside, the fallout alone. Tearing. Will you accept this class? He sagged a little in relief. So I can say no. No, he said without hesitation. Another prompt appeared. Necromancer is a hidden class. Will you still refuse? Hidden. He hesitated. In games, that word meant rare. In reality, hunters with strange abilities existed too. Shield users, buffers, even the White Tiger Guild's master who was rumored to transform. Those with rare abilities were courted by the biggest guilds. If hidden meant special, then maybe this wasn't a curse. The system had said he thirsted for power and recommended Necromancer. That implied potential. Most rare abilities were support. A rare class that could fight on the front line was something else entirely. His heartbeat picked up. If I could test drive Necromancer first. But life didn't hand out demos. He'd never heard of a true Necromancer in the wild. Mages with their own armies didn't exist. He looked around at the room full of shattered knights. Wait, those mages from the trial, weren't they essentially necromancers? Their knights had been an army. Fighting them had been hell. If he hadn't cracked the trick, or if they'd been strung up close, he'd be the one on the floor. He was different. He had close combat prowess. A mage with hands like his, plus an army? That would be the enemy's worst nightmare. What if? A B-rank dungeon, solo. Higher. If his stats kept climbing as a necromancer, his forces would scale with him. Not just him leveling, his army leveling too. A chill raced up his spine. The decision screen still waited. The system, for once, didn't rush him. Is this what you want me to become? Silence. He made up his mind. If it gave him power, he'd take it. I accept. The system moved at once. Your class has been set. Based on your advancement points, you may promote to a higher tier version of this class. Calculations in progress. tallying advancement points. While it worked, he unwrapped the bandage on his right hand. He'd gripped the dagger so hard his palm had swollen. Great. Blisters. A single potion would have fixed it, but he couldn't use one here. He was sliding Night Killer toward his inventory when more prompts chimed. You've exceeded the expected time limit. Bonus points granted. He smirked. Figures. I did last a while. Then the messages cascaded. You did not use the immediate return stone. Remaining HP above 50%. All enemies eliminated. Total advancement points exceed class-specific limit. Per contract, a special reward will be granted. Special reward? He forgot the dagger and fixed on the text. Your class has been upgraded from Necromancer to Shadow Sovereign. You have acquired class-specific skills. You have acquired bonus stats. Title acquired. The one who overcame adversity. Shadow. Sovereign. He snapped open his status. Name. Song Jinwoo. Level. 51. Class. Shadow Sovereign. Not Necromancer anymore. The system had promised a higher tier if his points were high enough. Apparently he'd blown past the cap. So this is the special reward. He didn't get to savor it. Something stranger unfolded behind the translucent UI. Black smoke seeped out of every shattered suit of armor on the floor. That hadn't happened before. A minute ago, these are just empty shells. Now, he closed the status and swept the room. Smoke coiled up from all the fallen knights. Shadow extraction available for the selected target. Wherever his gaze fell on that black haze, a prompt appeared. Extraction possible. Shadow extraction? The smoke looked pained. Reaching. Begging. Weird. He could almost hear them. But one thing was clear. He could end it. Shadow extraction. Please set an activation command for shadow extraction. A command phrase? He thought for a breath and spoke without overthinking. Rise up. A heavy moan swelled. Shadows around him twitched. A hand pressed up from a pool of darkness, fingers clawing for purchase, followed by an arm. Oh man, there were people shaped. No, soldiers, climbing from the shadows in head-to-toe, jet black armor. This is my new skill. By the time he collected himself, a couple dozen stood at attention around him. Shadow extraction succeeded. Tens of soldiers ringed him. What is this? He stepped to the nearest one and reached out. Cold metal. Real armor. Real weapons. From a distance, they looked human. Up close, there was no breath, no heartbeat. Through the visor, only darkness. These came out of shadows. He pulled up his skill list. New entries glowed there. Class skills. Active. Shadow extraction LV.1. Shadow storage LV.1. He opened the first. Skill. Shadow extraction LV.1. Class-specific skill. Mana cost. None. Extracts a shadow soldier by drawing mana from a recently deceased life form. Extraction chance decreases with the target's original stats and time since death. Shadows available. 30 of 30. So that's what they were. Undead, pulled from the dead shadows. His throat tightened. If they're mine. He raised an arm and pointed right. All heads turned right in perfect synchrony. He swept his hand forward. In unison, they faced front. He stood at their center, forced his excitement down, and lowered his hand. Every soldier dropped to one knee. They moved to his will. He let out a breath, a grin tugging at his mouth. Tell me that isn't the coolest thing ever.
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
Oops. A thought flashed by in Jinwoo's head. I shouldn't be wasting time like this. He had witnessed the power of his new skill. He could now turn the defeated monsters into his soldiers. If that was the case, then wasn't there a monster nearby that he just had to turn into his lackey right away? Jinwoo climbed up the pile of armors that once used to be the giant iron golem and stood on top. By being so high up, he could take in the entirety of the boss room. Jinwoo searched around as his glare became sharper. Found it. Confirming the direction, Jinwoo immediately ran over there. Perhaps he was feeling really psyched. He arrived there in the blink of an eye, even though he didn't use the dash skill. Gulp. Jinwoo looked the corpse of the monster that he was planning to extract the shadow from, and swallowed dry saliva. The creature remained in the exact same spot where he had killed it. Ygritte the Crimson. The sight of the red-armored headless knight half buried in the thick, sturdy wall told how desperate his situation was back then. Jinwoo stood before Ygritte. It might have been a fearsome enemy that threatened to kill him only a few hours ago, but now it was probably the best ingredient he could find. Fortunately enough, he saw the black smoke slowly oozing out from Ygritte, just like how it was with other fallen knights. It is possible to perform shadow extraction on the selected target. Jinwoo's expression brightened. Nice. He already knew the drill. Jinwoo took a short but deep breath and spoke out the command phrase. Rise up. He spoke the activation phrase for the skill, shadow extraction. However, the skill didn't activate. Jinwoo tilted his head this way and that way, and was about to say the command phrase again. But then, following a tearing, several warning messages popped up. You have exceeded the number of shadows that can be extracted. If you wish to perform shadow extraction, you must return a portion, or all, of your soldiers back to the world of nothingness via extraction cancellation. Once returned to nothingness, the shadow soldiers can't be summoned back. Oh yeah, there was something like that, wasn't there? At the end of the skill's explanation, there was something he should have taken note of. Number of shadows that can be extracted, 30. The maximum number of extractions he could perform was 30, which meant the number of his soldiers was currently 30. Jinwoo looked behind him. The shadow soldiers had followed him even before he had noticed it, and they were standing in attention. When did they? Perhaps fitting their title of shadow soldiers, they seemed to move around without making a single sound. Whatever the case might have been, if he wanted to extract Ygritte's shadow, he had to get rid of one of these guys, just as the system had alluded to. But it had only been a short while, yet when he thought about them being his soldiers, he kind of didn't want to dismiss any one of them. Did he get attached to them already? With a rueful, unwilling expression, Jinwoo slowly scanned each and every one of his shadow soldiers. As his eyes swept past the soldiers, their names and levels appeared before his view. Shadow Infantryman LV1, regular grade. Everyone possessed the same name and level. Oh well, their origins were exactly the same. But then he discovered 3 somewhat different colored soldiers right at the back of the infantrymen. Are those? Unlike the regular infantrymen, these guys were wearing robes. Shadow Magic Soldier LV, elite grade. Oh, he quickly figured out what they were. The 3 mages that were controlling the Iron Golem must have been revived as undeads as well when he gave out his Rise Up command just now. So, 27 infantrymen and 3 mages, eh? This was why being rare was a good thing. He excluded the low-numbered mages and selected the closest infantryman from him to cancel the extraction. And he was really sorry about this. Extraction cancellation. Fush! The soldier turned into black smoke and scattered in the air. Not even a trace remained of it. Jinwoo gazed at the spot of the disappeared soldier for a little while with an apologetic expression, before shifting his attention back to Ygritte. His preparation was complete. He even had to sacrifice one of his wonderful soldiers just so he could turn Ygritte into a shadow. So, he simply had to see some results here. Time to act while the sun still shone. Jinwoo tried the extraction right away. When he did that, the shadow cast beneath Ygritte began to wiggle as if it came to life. It was the same reaction as when he extracted the shadows from the knights just now. Okay, good. Jinwoo clenched his fists tightly. He had a good feeling about this. Shadow extraction has commenced. Attempting to extract. What would Ygritte look like after its extraction? Jinwoo's hands became slick with the sweat of anticipation. Unfortunately, ting! A mechanical beep akin to a metal plate breaking in half rang inside his head. Shadow extraction has failed. What? 2 more attempts remaining. Phew. Hearing that he still had more chances remaining, Jinwoo spat out a long sigh of relief. Hang on, now that I think about it. The skill's explanation definitely said that the odds of extraction failure would rise up depending on the target stat values. But having experienced it personally, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. It felt like he got slapped in the back of his head, this taste of his first failure. Not only that, there was a restriction on the number of attempts he could try too. So, I have 2 more attempts remaining. If he failed in both attempts, then did that mean Ygritte's shadow would disappear into that nothingness, just as the sacrificed infantryman did? Imagining the worst possible scenario, he felt dizzy for a second. Jinwoo quickly shook his head to clear his mind. Let's stop thinking negatively about this. Indeed, only positive thoughts. Didn't someone say that if you believed earnestly enough, the universe would find a way to help you out? While stewing inside anxiety and anticipation, Jinwoo attempted the extraction for the second time. Too bad, his expectation was shot down grandly once more. One more attempt remaining. This guy gave him so much trouble while it was still alive, and even in death, it was managing to give him some serious headaches. And here he was, hoping against hope. Now that he had failed twice in a row, his vision seemed to have blurred, everything looking a bit bleak. Phew! Jinwoo deeply inhaled and exhaled his breath. There were no more attempts remaining after this. He had only one more shot left. Jinwoo closed his eyes and reorganized his thoughts. Well, it could be nothing more than percentages and odds, but it was possible that his desire to possess Ygritte's shadow wasn't earnest or strong enough. Jinwoo slowly reopened his eyes. He sensed the black smoke rising up from Ygritte reaching out to him, pleading with him to save it. Jinwoo became a lot more serious than before, and he reached out with his right hand as if to grab that pleading hand of the smoke. He didn't do it deliberately. He himself didn't quite realize it then, but Jinwoo's voice sounded much heavier and graver than ever before, and it reverberated throughout the boss room. It was then. Yuwa dash. A deep scream could be heard coming from somewhere, and chilling, eerie winds swept by the boss room. Isn't this it? He remembered encountering a similar situation like this one before, back when his infantryman first popped out from the shadows. Aya dash. Just as he hoped for. As the lengthy scream came to an end, a long black hand emerged out from the shadow. And when that hand pressed down on the ground, a new message popped up in his view. Shadow extraction was a success. FLL0W current novels O/NN/O/V/3L/B in.C/O/M. Jinwoo let out a cry of happiness. Yes. He tightly clenched his fists. The taste of success was so much sweeter since he had to go through 2 failures to get here. However, the good news didn't end there. The Sovereign's voice had awakened the departed's fighting spirit. You have succeeded in strengthening your Shadow Soldier. The Shadow's level will now start at 7. I succeeded in strengthening? What? A Shadow's starting level could be higher than 1? Jinwoo's eyes widened once more. Just as the message said, the Black Knight emerging from the shadow carried level 7 in its status. Jinwoo spat out a short gasp. The newly emerged shadow looked exactly as it was in his memories. The mane attached to the helm, the highly fashionable armor wrapped around its entire body, that noble, dignified cape. The only difference being that the blood-like armor now sported a pitch-black color instead. Everything else was exactly the same. I'd have probably believed it if someone told him that Ygritte had returned to life just now. However, the newly born Ygritte didn't display a single hint of animosity towards him. No, it just stood there quietly, waiting for Jinwoo to give a new order. Thump, thump. Jinwoo's heart began pounding in excitement as he stared at Ygritte, and there was a big grin etched on his face. Even though his heart was palpitating, there was something he was curious about. Jinwoo's gaze shifted just above Ygritte's head. Why doesn't this guy have a name? LV7. Night grade. For some strange reason, there was a couple of question marks instead of its name. And its grade is also different. He understood that its level was high because of that strengthening thing, but still, this guy exhibited quite a few differences from the regular infantryman. Perhaps it read Jinwoo's mind, because the system sent him a new message with excellent timing. Tiering. You can bestow a name to a Night grade soldier. The bestowed name will be maintained until the Shadow Soldier is dismissed. Please set the soldier's name. A name, is it? At first, he was at a loss with this unexpected demand, but soon enough, he recalled that this guy already had a name, and a smile crept up on his face. There should be no problem calling it by its original name. No? The message blinked, as if to urge him on with the naming already. Jinwoo opened his mouth. Igrit the CRI. No, hang on a minute. When the system asked him to set the name, it meant that he'd have to use that name to call this guy from here onwards. So, didn't that also mean that he'd have to call it Igrit the blah blah all the time from now on? Just thinking about that gave him a nasty case of goosebumps. That's way too cringy. In the end, he decided to shorten the name somewhat. Igrit. Will you set the name as Igrit? That's right. As soon as Jinwoo spoke, the question marks on the guy's head disappeared and the name Igrit appeared there. Igrit LV7. All he did was to simply give it its original name, yet Jinwoo still felt like he had accomplished something pretty amazing. He was filled with contentment, knowing that this guy was his loyal soldier now. My own loyal soldier, Jinwoo took a look behind him. 29 shadow soldiers were still there, waiting for his orders. For now, the number was too small. Only 30, huh? Either this was because the skill level of shadow extraction was too low, or because his intelligence stat hadn't been raised high enough yet. But he was sure of one thing, and that was the number of his soldiers would gradually swell up. Yup, I really have myself a new army. Not only that, they weren't some skeletons and corpses, but an army of shadows. Now, there was only one problem remaining, and that was how he'd walk around with these guys. Now that gave him a bit of headache. Doesn't matter skeletons or shadows. It'd be way too eye-catching if these guys freely walked around in the streets. Would that be all? This skill was already way past regular people accepting it as one of the many awakened abilities a hunter could possess. Either he'd be under the constant surveillance, or worse, someone might even demand him to dismiss the summoning, too. Woo Jinchul, the section chief of the monitoring division, the Korean Hunters Association. Thinking about how stuffy-looking guys like that man would come around every day and annoy him to no end in the future, Jinwoo felt like he'd die from frustration already. That was precisely why the next skill existed, probably. Skills. Jinwoo summoned his skill window. Class-specific skills. Active skills. Shadow Extraction LV1. Shadow Storage LV1. The skill he only checked its name and nothing else until now. The Shadow Storage. That name alone made him think that this skill would help him out in these sorts of situations. Class-specific skill. Mana required to activate. None. Stores the shadow soldiers inside the summoner's shadow. The stored soldiers can be summoned back into the open or absorbed back at any time the summoner chooses to. Number of stored shadow soldiers. 0/20v// ISSD 0v L/B I N. The slash for the B/est novel reading expiry /N/C. I knew it. Jinwoo nodded his head. Since the skill's name had the word storage in it, he expected it to have something to do with storing away the soldiers. Unfortunately, there was a part that proved to be completely out of his expectations. How come the number is? The number of soldiers he could store was noticeably lower than those he could create. Indeed, he could create 30, yet he could only store 20, meaning he had to unsummon 10 more. Now this sucks. Just which finger out of the 10 in your hands wouldn't hurt when you bite them. Just discarding one made his heart bleed, but now he had to discard 10? Jinwoo stared at the soldiers with a rather lonely expression on his face. Obviously, the Knight Grade Igrit was excluded. 3 magic soldiers were also excluded, since they would be harder to replace and also fewer in numbers. At the end of the day, the most disposable remained the infantryman. Last time, he chose the one closest to him, so this time, he chose the 10 that were furthest away from him and canceled their summoning. Sorry. He prayed for their happiness in the afterlife. And then, poof, in the blink, those 10 soldiers turned into dust and disappeared from this world. Thankfully, his heart didn't ache as badly as the first time. To the wise old, they mean this by saying that the first time was always the hardest? In any case, Jinwoo took one last look at the soldiers and activated the shadow storage. When he did that, all the shadow soldiers, including Ygritte, all returned to being shadows, as if they were melting like an ice cube caught in extremely high temperatures. Those shadows all gathered beneath his feet next. So this is that absorbing into my shadow thing. It was as the label said. The shadows were absorbed into Jinwoo's shadow. It happened so quickly, too. All of his soldiers disappeared without a trace in less than a blink of an eye. Thought I'm the one who did it, yet I can hardly believe it myself. Utterly amazed now, Jinwoo continued to stare at his own shadow. It was then, as if it was waiting for this, the mechanical beeps resounded out one after the other. Tearing, you have experimented with all the class-specific skills. Class change has been now concluded. Exit gate will now be generated. So, it's finally over, huh? What a long and difficult road this was. Jinwoo scanned the interior of the boss room, his eyes full of reminiscence. The evidence of fierce battle could be seen everywhere. Broken down knights, walls with cracks on them, a shattered stone pillar, and the iron golem responsible for shattering that very pillar, now nothing more than a scrap heap. However, as the compensation for his struggles, he was now walking away with so much profit. A new class and skills, several other important things besides those, as well as powerful new allies. A wide grin naturally floated up on his lips. Without hesitation, Jinwoo turned around. The gate connecting to the outside world was quietly waiting for him, as if to congratulate him on his successful adventure. When he took a step outside, the surroundings changed in an instant, and he was back in the empty lot of the local mountainside. It was none other than the very spot where he initiated his class change quest. The time indicated was 5 in the morning. It was already time for the sunrise. Oops. Jinwoo clicked his tongue while confirming the time. If I knew the quest would end up taking this long to complete, I should have left a message for Gina earlier. What a relief, then, that had often come home late from raids, taking longer than expected, back when he was working for the association. Jinwoo took one last look behind him, but the gate he exited from just now was already gone without a trace. When looking at the spot where the gate used to be, it kind of felt like he had woken up from a long dream. Was it a dream? No, that wasn't possible. Jinwoo scanned his immediate vicinity. The soldiers decked out in pitch-black armors, as soon as he thought about them, they rapidly emerged from his shadow. At first, he simply thought of them as nothing more than monsters. The shadow soldiers. The monsters that stepped out from the shadows of the dead after they were summoned by him. However, if these things are monsters, then just what should the guy who could freely control them be called now? Jinwoo smirked softly. Well, it doesn't matter one way or the other. Jinwoo stored the soldiers back into his shadow. He noticed that his steps going down the mountain were rather light and cheery. Jinwoo slept until late in the day, but that couldn't be helped. By the time he got back home, the sun had risen up pretty high already. Ring, ring. Jinwoo's sweet slumber was eventually disrupted by the ringtone from his smartphone. His hand fumbled around near his head and with some difficulty located his phone. HLO. His voice cracked up from his dry throat. Oh, Appa, you were still asleep? You know what time it is? Jean AH's shocked voice came out from the speaker. So he asked her back. Okay, what time is it now? It's 2 in the afternoon. Yeah, what? He glanced at the time on the phone screen with half-open eyes. She was telling the truth. Appa, you haven't forgotten that you're supposed to come to my school today, have you? Her voice sounded anxious. Jinwoo finally raised his upper body, albeit very slowly. What time should I get there at the latest? Before 5. I won't be late, so don't worry. As expected of my Orabionim. When you're near the school, give me a call first. Okay? TL. Orabionim equals a higher form of honorific than Appa. Gina switched on her charm attack and ended the call soon afterwards. Scratch, scratch. Jinwoo scratched his unkempt hair for a bit before slowly getting up from the bed. He didn't have a lot of time left if he were to get ready. Well, I'm going to meet my sister's homeroom teacher after all. Not only that, this teacher would be in charge of her 3rd year in high school, one of the most important periods in a person's life. So, I can't just wear whatever now, right? He opened the closet and rummaged through the clothes in there. However, he was greeted by a rather dusty, moldy odor. Of course, It was not something pleasant to smell at all. Jin Woo's frown deepened. He continued to dig around, but all he could find was an old business suit he wore once during his own high school graduation. Will even fit me now? He was hoping against hoping, but well, as expected, the clothes were too snug, and he couldn't even move his arms. Yup, my body has grown much bigger lately. Putting on the old clothes painted a stark picture of his current reality. The suit was nearly bursting at the seams, literally. What should he do now? Jin Woo was pondering what to do, but then he spotted the bank book that Eugene Ho gave him a day before. It was for the account filled with the proceeds from selling off all those magic crystals. He alternated his gaze between his nearly torn clothes and the bank book with its new stamps still sealed together, before a smile formed on his lips. Been a while, but should I go on a shopping spree then? Before that, though, there was this small thing he had to confirm first. Actually, it was a bit bigger than that, but still. Jin Woo took off the old business suit and, while sitting on the edge of the bed, summoned his status window. Stats. With that, a long board full of letters and numbers appeared before his eyes. Name: Song Jin Woo. Level: 51. Class: Shadow Sovereign. Title: Slaughterer of Wolves, Extra 1. HP: 11,035. MP: 1022. Tiredness: 0. Stats: Strength: 132. Stamina: 91. Agility: 111. Intelligence: 70. Perception: 93. Available points to distribute: 10. Reduction in physical damage: 46%. Skills: Passive skills: Unknown LV Max. Tenacity LV1. High-grade dagger technique LV1. Active skills: Dash LV2. Intimidation LV1. Vital points targeting LV2. Dagger throw LV1. Stealth LV1. Class-specific skills: Shadow extraction LV1. Shadow storage LV1. Equipped items: Red Knight's helm S. Gatekeeper's necklace A. Superior Knight's breastplate B. Superior Knight's gauntlet B. Superior Mage's ring B. Intermediate Assassin's shoes C. TL note: the author forgot to put Ruler's Reach in the skills column. I left it as is. Huh. Jin Woo could only chuckle wryly as his status window seemed to go on forever and ever. It was only a short while ago that there was nothing on this section over here. Indeed, there had been a time like that once. But now, just from looking at his skills and equipped items, his head grew fuzzy. Even then, his class still managed to snag his attention for sure. This column used to be none only yesterday. To be honest, he was kind of bothered by that word whenever he had a look at his status window. The reason for that was, naturally, the word that came before that, none being his class. If a hunter was not participating in a raid, he'd be no different than a jobless bum. That's what most others would think, anyway. But then, he had to keep looking at the no job in the status window, where his stat values were recorded. So how could he not feel bothered by it? TL note at the end. They said that once you got shocked by a turtle, you'd keep getting frightened by the pot lids. Whenever he took a look at his class column in the past, he couldn't help but feel a bit frustrated. He knew that it didn't really mean his job status, but he still felt quite bothered by it. However, from today onwards, he didn't have to mind such things anymore. Ha ha ha. Jin Woo chuckled out uncontrollably. Yup, this must be what they call an inferiority complex, isn't it? If he made lots of money like other hunters, he wouldn't have really cared about what others thought of his life outside of raiding dungeons. But he couldn't do that. He couldn't confidently reveal his status as a hunter to anyone, because he was a measly rank E who could barely protect his own life. That was why. I'm a ranky hunter. Whenever he said those words, anyone with some knowledge of hunters would always say that he was doing something very difficult for everyone's sakes, but they would start mocking him when his back was turned. That was why he ended up minding it even more than necessary. But now, he was the possessor of a really cool job, a really special trait. His job still remained as a hunter, of course. If he were to describe it then, well, it'd be more correct to say that he now possessed a special trait of Shadow Sovereign. Although this wasn't the career path I was looking for. But he had no regrets. No, rather than regrets, he was completely and utterly satisfied by how things had turned out. If this wasn't his room, he'd have summoned Ygritte and the other soldiers right away. He really wanted to confirm the combat capabilities of his summons with his own eyes. What if these guys were able to display 100% of their combat prowess while they were still alive? I'm sure that won't be the case, though. Still, just imagining it made his heart race. Thump, thump. Jin Woo felt his heart beating roughly as he ran several simulations of future raids in his head. Suddenly, he became really curious about how Eugene Ho would react. Smirk. When Jin Woo imagined seeing Eugene Ho's round, stunned eyes and his slack jaw falling to the floor, a chuckle automatically leaked out of his mouth. Wait, now that I think about it, if he could transform any dead life forms into his soldiers, and if the targets weren't restricted to only monsters, then does that mean I can extract shadows from the dead hunters, too? It was quite obvious, but he didn't want to picture such a situation since he was talking about another human being here. An undead soldier, emerging from the shadow of a dead person after hearing his call. Just thinking about it gave him chills. Even still, what if I extract the shadow of an A or an S rank hunter? The combat potential of the resulting shadow soldier would simply be out of this world. Even if a shadow soldier could only exhibit 50% of its original strength, it'd be eminently possible to solo high-ranked dungeons, as long as he had his shadows to back him up. His beating heart picked up its pace really quick. Thump, thump, thump. Still, Jin Woo shook his head. Even if that's the case, turning a person into an undead is a bit. Now that was something only a villain would do. His combat potential might improve that way, but he didn't want to go that far. Unless a really evil B asterisk starred showed up that was worthy of such a treatment, he'd definitely not go down that route. However, it's not like opportunities to fight other dirty hunters would come around every day, right? And even if he did find that elusive opportunity, there would be many hurdles to overcome first. Well, a human wasn't a monster to begin with, after all. Indeed, for the time being, he had to be satisfied with the current soldiers. Besides, I have Ygritte, and he used to be a boss, so that's something. The level 7 Knight Grade Shadow Soldier. Just how good would its abilities be? Jin Woo couldn't wait for the next raid. Jin Woo lowered his gaze slightly while feeling rather pleased with himself. Then he spotted something else in the status window. Title: Slaughterer of Wolves, Extra 1. There was another one? Oh. Now that he thought about it, he did earn a new title as well during the class change quest, didn't he? Jin Woo checked out the hidden title's description. Title: The One Who Overcame the Adversity. A title only given to those who have splendidly overcome their adversity. Your stat values will rise as your HP decreases. 1% of lost HP equals 1% gain in stats. Hell yeah. It was a truly wonderful buff where his stats would rise up as his HP was decreased. The title Slaughterer of Wolves was a wonderful title as well that would give him a 40% stats increase against any and all beast-type monsters. However, because there was a strict activation condition attached to it, he often had to do without receiving the stat buff. It's the same thing as not having a title if I'm not fighting against beast-type monsters. But now he had gotten a new title with a wonderful effect. After reading the description, he thought that this title's effect would match up quite nicely with his passive tenacity. Without wasting any more time, Jin Woo changed his title. Title: The One Who Overcame the Adversity, Extra 1. The title he didn't set would be hidden, and if he needed it, he could swap them at any time, too. Next up, it's my stats. The rewards he got for exceeding the point limits of his class yesterday were 3. 1. His class changed to a higher grade version. 2. A new title. Finally, bonus stat points. Stats: Strength, 132. Stamina, 91. Agility, 111. Intelligence, 70. Perception, 93. Available points to distribute, 10. Reduction in physical damage, 46%. He still had 10 points yet to be allocated. If it was in the past, he'd have spent them all in agility or perception, but things were different now. Jin Woo dumped all 10 points in intelligence instead. Even then, his intelligence value only reached 80. Tiering: Intelligence, 80. Available points to distribute, 0. Compared to strength or agility, it simply fell way behind. As a matter of fact, it even fell behind stamina, the stat he decided to put on the back burner while raising his agility first. It was clear proof that he had been looking down on the intelligence stat until now. Well, I never guessed that I'd somehow end up using magic, so it's understandable. For the time being, he decided to invest every single bonus stat point he earned into intelligence. He wasn't planning to change how he fought in the meantime, though. I mean, the new skills I got are assassination-type skills, after all. A new skill he acquired during the fierce battle, the dagger throw. He didn't even have to take a gander at the skill description to know that it was a dagger-exclusive skill. Skill, dagger throw LV1. Active skill, required mana to activate, 30. Exclusive to daggers. Causes damage by throwing your dagger. The higher the level, the greater the damage inflicted, as well as the accuracy. Yup, I knew it. He had been fighting his battles as a close-quarter melee fighter. He wouldn't change his current fighting style just because he got himself a new class and a couple of new skills related to that. So, he was planning to use the shadow skills as his backup, while the dagger would remain as his primary means of attack. Well, at least until I managed to raise my intelligence stat to a somewhat more useful level. That is, excellent combat abilities, and soldiers able to support him from behind. The plan he formed in his head as he got his new class hadn't changed. But if there's one difference from my initial expectations, then that would be his soldiers potentially being a lot more useful than he thought. Who could have guessed that he was able to turn boss-level monsters into his underlings? Still, he felt that it'd be a bit of waste not to utilize his proficiency with daggers and the skills related to that if he were to rely solely on his shadows to fight. Also, he bought the Night Killer only a few hours ago, too. If I knew I'd end up as a mage type, maybe I should have bought a magic staff or something. Of course, if he did that, he wouldn't have cleared the quest and ended up being buried under the knights instead. Jin Woo closed the status window. With that done, he pretty much had confirmed every change that occurred to him. Wait a sec. What's the time now? While he was doing his thing, 20 minutes had flown by. Jin Woo scratched the side of his head. I guess I should hurry up, huh? The corners of Jin Woo's lips arched up. The power of his enhanced stats didn't prove to be effective only when fighting against monsters. When he concentrated, time slowed down. To be more precise, it was Jin Woo who had gotten quicker, however. He opened the door and left his room. He entered the bathroom and took a quick shower. He swiftly wiped the water off of him. He put on whatever clothing he could find and stood before the mirror. All this, and he only needed 3 minutes. He could have moved faster, but he figured that this old, decrepit apartment would fall apart if he did. My hair hasn't completely dried out yet, but the end result was him saving over 20 minutes, so there was no need to rush now. Time to leave, then. Jin Woo was about to step out of his room, but discovered something and stopped in his tracks. He found the key for the apartment. It was sitting on top of his desk. In the past, Hedda felt a bit lazy and unwilling, but still turned back to grab the key. However, he simply extended his hand instead of walking over there. I mean, if I don't use it in times like this, just when will I ever get to use this skill? The ruler's reach. The key crept forward bit by bit, before flying into his open palm as if a strong magnet was reeling it in. Grab! Jin Woo snatched the key and grinned refreshingly. Having gotten ready to leave in the proverbial blink of an eye, Jin Woo closed the door to his room, a whistle escaping from his lips. Jin Woo's first stop was at the bank. He was wondering just how much cash from the sales of the magic crystals had accumulated in his new bank account. I couldn't come earlier because I've been so busy until now. As the raid team leader, Eugene Ho was in charge of managing the magic crystals. From what he told Jin Woo, that kid had been selling all the magic crystals at the end of each day and deposited every single cent into this account. He didn't mention in detail how much the money would be, though. That Jin Ho. He reports to me every little thing that happens, but he doesn't really mention much about money issues. Was it because he wasn't really interested all that much? Perhaps because he grew up lacking nothing. Eugene Ho's interests were quite far removed from the matters involving money. No, they tended to be along the lines of celebrity gossip, stories of raids, songs, or movies. He liked those kinds of things. Even if it was nominally a conversation, it'd be Eugene Ho who yapped on and on all by himself, though. And Jin Woo would simply listen quietly on the side and provide appropriate responses every now and then. Now that I think about it, a chatterbox guy like him also didn't say anything about his family situation until now. Now, that was pretty strange. Jin Woo combed through his memories, starting from when they met for the first time, but he couldn't remember a single instance of him mentioning his family. While thinking that it was pretty bizarre, he had arrived at the bank. Well now, that's some crappy timing, isn't it? All of the ATMs were currently under maintenance. He was left with little choice, so Jin Woo walked inside the bank branch. He got his number in the queue, waited for his turn before eventually sitting down in front of a bank teller. "Hello there." A female teller with a bob-cut hair reaching just below her ears and a refreshing smile asked him politely, "How may I be of service today? I'd like to see the amount currently in the bank account, please." "I understand." With a smile, the female teller took the bank book Jin Woo presented to her. While waiting for her to do her thing, Jin Woo scanned the inside of the bank. It was a normal Thursday afternoon, yet there were quite a large number of people inside. As he continued to look at the crowd, the female teller got to confirm the amount resting in Jin Woo's account, and her eyes shot open super wide. Heek! Remaining amount, 1,482,920,000 TL, just over $1.315 mil. She checked the number of digits again, but without a doubt, it started from a billion. Not only that, he hadn't even accumulated this amount over a long period of time. For the past week or so, the record showed that over 100 million won had been deposited every single day. He looked so young, so how could he? The female teller initially took Jin Woo as a university student who came to the local bank to get the bank book newly printed on because his mother asked him to. But her expression had changed quite a bit now. The female teller asked him, her voice containing just a sliver of ulterior motive. "Oh my goodness, may I ask what you do for a living?" Perhaps she herself was embarrassed by her own ulterior motive. The female bank teller's cheeks blushed softly as she cautiously studied Jin Woo's reactions. He replied as if it was nothing. "I'm a hunter." "Ah." The female teller slowly nodded her head almost instinctively. The popular rumor she heard was indeed true. "I heard that hunters made lots of money, but to think it'd be on this level." All of a sudden, her life as a normal working-class employee came across as rather pathetic. Only until a minute ago, this man was a regular customer, just like everyone else. But now, Jin Woo looked like a person from another galaxy altogether. He must be a pretty high-ranked hunter, right? This amount wasn't something an average hunter with average skills could ever hope to touch. This would be her first time meeting a truly high-ranked hunter then. The unexpectedness of this situation caused her heart to palpitate just a bit faster. FLL0W current novels O/N/O/V/3L/B and C/O/M. Thump, thump. Her heart was indeed beating a bit quicker now. A young customer possessing well over $1 billion in cash would certainly be a VIP in the eyes of the bank. And well, that customer was a hunter, so he should be treated as a VVIP instead. And so, in order to ensure that this VVP wouldn't slip through the bank's fingers, the female employee began advertising several of the bank's financial products. "Our bank has launched brand new products and services especially catered for VIP customers such as yourself." Her smile was no longer the business one, but a real one too. The female bank teller's gaze was now firmly fixed on Jin Woo. "Oh my," he's seeing his current appearance, the one where he must have thrown on some clothes lying around, and that slightly disheveled hair. Her heart began beating faster than ever before. She realized that he must have been a very busy man who managed to find some free time to stop by the bank today. This product has proven really popular with our customers lately. So how about taking a closer look at the benefits it offers, sir? Too bad for her. Jin Woo refused right away. "No, thank you. I'm fine." "Ah, is that so?" The female bank teller's voice was thickly laden with regrets over missed chances. Sensing that this chat might get drawn out if he said something wrong here, Jin Woo quickly took the bank book and stood up from the seat. "Thank you for your help. Have a nice day." He made his quick getaway from the bank as the hot stares from the female bank teller continued to bear down on his back. As soon as the bank's door closed behind him, "Phew!" Jin-woo spat out a sigh of relief. He picked up on the change in the bank teller's expression the moment he revealed his job as a hunter. Attentions of strangers and their interests. It would probably be something normal for other hunters, but it was still something new to Jin-woo. Well, I better get used to it now. The attention on him would get even worse than this once he's gone through with the reassignment test and gets a super high rank. He heard that there were quite a few reporters and fans following around particular hunters as well. He raised his head slightly and saw a large electronic billboard displaying a cold drink advert featuring a famous hunter attached to the side of the skyscraper. Before Gates appeared in the world, one would have found top sports stars or popular idols occupying that position. That's right. This was the age where a hunter would be at the receiving end of more attention and adulation than a celebrity. Even Jin-woo wouldn't be an exception now. The only person who didn't like hunters nowadays were probably employees of various insurance companies. Besides all that, only after he made his escape from the bank did he get to confirm the amount in the account. And his eyes grew real wide afterwards. 1.48 billion. The total amount of money he earned after participating in 9 raids was almost 1.5 billion won, meaning each ranked C dungeon netted him almost 160 million won. He got around 180 million from the dungeon he raided with Hwang Dong-suk and company. So, the average amount per rank C gate he got was somewhere between 150 and 200 million each raid. Yup, that's why that bank teller was so shocked, wasn't it? Now that he was done confirming his financial status, Jin-woo splurged on a nice-looking business suit at a department store. He still found himself with more than enough free time, so he stopped by a hair salon nearby and got a much-needed haircut as well. He had transformed into someone completely different compared to when leaving the apartment. This is why having money is way better than not having any. And they said that good clothes would become one's wings, too. Jin-woo stopped by the front of a shop's window on the street and checked out his reflection for a bit before shrugging his shoulders. His preparation was as perfect as it could get. "I'm sure I won't leave behind a bad first impression." He adjusted his clothes for a bit before confirming the time through his phone. It said 16:20. "I'm supposed to get there before 5, right? If he got going now, he should arrive on time." Taxi. Jin-woo grabbed a taxi and arrived in front of GNHS school with enough time to spare. And as luck would have it, he spotted Gina standing by the school's front gate. Song Gina dash. Discovering her older brother belatedly, she gasped out in pure shock. "Appa?" Gina's eyes became extra round like a rabbit's as she asked cautiously, Are you really Mr. Song Jin-woo? Can't you recognize your own brother?" Most uptod slash in Vels a slash republished on in Vero Velj C slash O slash M. Gina swept her gaze all over Jin-woo with a stunned expression still etched on her face, her voice naturally rising higher. "It's because you've changed so much, you know." "What? So you wanted me to show up in my tracksuit and slippers when meeting your new homeroom teacher?" Wow. Gina still couldn't close her slack jaw. "Hey, your chin might fall off at this rate. Anyways, I'm going ahead." "Okay." Since his sister didn't show any sign of guiding the way, Jin-woo simply took the lead. 5 years ago, Jin-woo too was a student in this very school. He already knew its layout like the back of his hand. Now, normally, if teachers wanted to speak to the parents, then the meeting place would either be the staff room or at the counseling office. But today's matter involved GNHS' future career path, so he should head to the counseling office. And so, Jin-woo's steps quickened. "Oh, Appa, wait for me." Gina hurriedly ran after her older brother. "Hello there, teacher Nim." "Yes." "Oh, hello to you too." While on his way, Jin-woo greeted several teachers he ran into. All of them stopped in their tracks without exception and took a look behind them at the departing back of Jin-woo. Who is that? Is he a graduate from this school? But there's no way I'd have forgotten about such an eye-catching student like that. Is he a new teacher? It wasn't only the teachers who were looking at him, though. Wow, he's good-looking, isn't he? Who is he? Wait, isn't that Gina next to him? He must be Gene AHS Appa. Wow, he's pretty cool. A well-built frame and a stylish business suit, although his facial features were on the plain side. The synergy between those 2 points were powerful enough to attract the attention of the female students. Too bad, the guy in question wasn't interested at all, though. Jin Woo simply let the girl's whispering slip in one ear and slide right out the other. The one to get really psyched up was Gina. Actually, she perked her ears up and listened to the assessment of her brother coming from the surroundings in a fit of happy giggles. She then sneaked closer to Jin Woo's side and lightly poked him on his waist with her elbow. "Hiya, Appa. You're proven to be really popular today, wouldn't you agree?" He ignored this. "Wait, now that I think about it, Appa, you still haven't found a girlfriend yet, right?" He also ignored this one. "Should I, your trusty little sister, introduce you to a cute high school girl?" And with that, Jin Woo began pinching her cheeks with an emotionless face. "Stop being cute, okay? Soe." Jin Woo eventually released her cheeks. Gina rubbed her reddened cheeks and pouted unhappily. "Che, I know you also like the attention, though." Walking while lightly bickering amongst each other, they had arrived at the destination already. Gina ran past Jin Woo and spun around in front of the counseling office. "Appa, we're here." Just before entering the office, Jin Woo looked at his sister. She wasn't budging from her spot. "What about you? Today's the teacher and parents only. I'm going back to my class as soon as you go inside." Oh, listening to Gina, he remembered something similar happening back when he was still a high school senior. Back then, no one came, though. It was around the time when it got harder and harder for Mom to move around, right? His mother began to frequent the hospital right around then. He feared that she might push herself too hard, so he didn't tell her about the teacher-parent meeting. And he got to suffer from his homeroom teacher's lectures for quite a while. Because of that, when recalling those moments, he could understand the reason for Gina being so anxious today. Jin Woo smiled gently and asked her, "You having a night class today as well?" Appa, don't wait for me and go home first." "Okay." Jin Woo sneak attacked her and rubbed her hair all out of shape. "Study hard, okay? They'll see you later." Stop it. "See you later at home." Jin Woo grinned and disappeared into the counseling office. Jean H's cheeks puffed up as she smoothed her hair. "Still treating me like a little kid." Of course, she didn't display any hint of disliking that. Maybe someone saw the whole thing. Gina quickly scanned her surroundings and confirmed that there was no one around her. She sighed in relief and trotted away to her class. If he were to put into words the first impression he got from Jean H's homeroom teacher, she kind of looked generous. "You must be Jean Ah's Appa." She was a middle-aged teacher with a wizened look about her. The overall impression she gave off was someone who could make other people feel better with a gentle and warm smile on her face. She perhaps knew his story because she wasn't surprised in the slightest to see Jin Woo being here as Jean H's guardian. "How do you do? I'm Jean H's homeroom teacher." I didn't quite expect Gina to be hiding someone as cool as her brother, to be honest. "Oh ho ho." Having received her outgoing and welcoming words, Jin Woo bowed his head politely as well. "I haven't seen her before. She must started teaching after he graduated from this school." Didn't someone say that a person's impression would be decided upon the first meeting? After sharing their greetings, he did feel a bit more relaxed. Well, she's using polite speech to someone who's many years her junior, too. It seemed that his little sister's third year in high school wouldn't be that traumatic after all, since she was lucky enough to run into a pretty nice homeroom teacher. "Please, take a seat over here." She showed him to a chair. Jin Woo settled down on the opposite side to Gina H's homeroom teacher across a large desk. We can rest easy about Gina now. They conversed for a while with typical topics that a homeroom teacher and parents would normally share, the atmosphere remaining cordial and rather cheery throughout the chat. Since Gina was a model student, there was no reason for either Jinwoo or the teacher to raise their voices at each other. "Are you aware that Gina has set her sights on entering a medical school?" "Yes, I am." The lady teacher began reading the prepared information. "Her scores in the mock test are excellent, and her regular grades are very good as well, so she should get in without too much problem. Still, please make sure that you don't pressure her too much at home." Jinwoo silently nodded his head. From the teacher's excited face, one could easily spy her high expectations of Jean H's future. The thing was, the homeroom teachers tasked with looking after high school seniors were also under a tremendous level of stress as well. Since it involved the rest of these third-year students' lives, how could they not get stressed out? That's why I heard that most try to avoid being a senior class homeroom teacher, though. Jean Woo also heard that there were plenty of cases where male teachers simply dumped the responsibilities to their female counterparts. When considering that, then he could say that Jean Ah's homeroom teacher was full of drive and passion for her students. As Jean Ah's guardian, Jean Woo could only be grateful for that, because drive and passion would mean she'd hold great interest in the future of her students. Maybe 15 minutes had passed by. The meeting was coming to a smooth end. Well then, if that's all. Jean Woo studied the mood and was getting ready to leave. But then, the teacher cautiously spoke to him. I heard that you were a hunter. Suddenly, the teacher became quite serious. There was something going on here. Jean Woo immediately sensed it. If Jean Ah is adjudged to be an awakened, will you let her do hunter's work as well? Never. He'd never allow her. Jean Woo decisively stated his position. There was no need to even reconsider this. Exactly as he had suspected, there was something here, and as proof, the teacher's expression became heavier still. As I thought, when Jean Woo looked at her with a puzzled expression, the teacher spoke in a determined tone of voice. If it's not too much trouble, may I ask you for a favor? Jean Woo nodded his head. As long as it's within my powers. He decided to hear her out first. Well, she was his little sister's homeroom teacher, so if he refused her outright without even listening to her once, he might leave behind a bad impression here. Worried that Jean Woo might change his mind, the teacher quickly opened her mouth. One of my students is thinking of quitting school to become a hunter full-time after she went through the awakening process. She's not even coming to school anymore, as a matter of fact. Such things were fairly common. There would be cases where a few newly awakened, having never experienced what real hunters did, thought of themselves as someone special, a chosen, a cut above the rest, etc., without having the faintest idea how cruel reality could be. Even though there weren't that many awakened who went on to become famous hunters and made lots of money in the world, though. The teacher let off a long sigh. If she continues to miss school this way, then the management won't have any choice but to act, you see? Even if she wishes to become a hunter, wouldn't it be better if she at least graduated from high school first? Jean Woo nodded his head in agreement. At his positive response, the teacher's complexion brightened just a bit. Can you help me persuade that child so she gets to graduate safe and sound? The teacher did her best to smile. Jean Woo was curious about one thing here. That student, what was her awaken rank? From what I hear, it's the lowest rank. In other words, a rank E. She won't get to live long, then. Jean Woo inwardly clicked his tongue. That was the rank where one had to be especially careful about entering a dungeon. Such a thing happening to a kid around the same age as his little sister was a sad thing. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, that choice was that girl's to make. No one could say otherwise. It was a rather lamentable thing indeed, but he didn't feel like taking time out of his busy schedule to interfere in someone else's life choices. Besides, I'm not confident about persuading her, too. Surely, most of what he would say wouldn't come across as nice things to hear. After all, Jean Woo was thinking of refusing the teacher and leaving. However, Jean Ah would recognize the child because her name is. When a girl's name came out from the teacher's mouth, Jean Woo realized that he couldn't easily get up from his spot now. Jean Woo confirmed the girl's name one more time. Teacher Nim, what was the name of the student again? It's by any chance you know who she is? TL. The girl's name is omitted in the raw. Yep, the Republic of Korea was indeed a tiny place. Jean Woo became rather speechless. At the same time, the private residence of Yu Myung-hwan, the owner of Yujin Construction. From early in the morning, countless expensive luxury vehicles continued to stream in. There was only one reason for that. It was for the ancestral rites ceremony for the first president of the Yujin Group, Yu Byung-chol, to be held later in the evening. Yu Myung-hwan was the #1 in Korea's financial sector, and Yu Byung-chol was his father. The eldest son, Yu Myung-hwan, made sure to perform the ceremony every single year. no matter how busy he was. And what with his influence being so great, every single relative found in the Yu family register had to gather in this place, without fail. CEO of XX Investment, Chairman of XX Pharmaceuticals, CEO of XX Department Store. Every single guest happened to be a heavy hitter, and their children all happened to be the elites of the elite, too, with the sole exception of one. And that exception had excused himself to the quiet and far-removed corner of the proceedings, even though no one asked him to. And he was none other than Eugene Ho. And bored, he wished that time would move faster. Going around raiding dungeons with his Hyungnim was 100 times, 1,000 times more enjoyable than this. What would Hyungnim be doing right about now? Now that he thought about it for a second, he couldn't even begin to imagine just what Hyungnim would do during his off days. And so, while thinking about useless stuff in a corner, out of everyone's gazes and throwing back blameless refreshments all the time, but he heard a voice he didn't particularly want to hear today. Why? Well, sure enough, a perfect model of how an upper-class elite of society should behave was standing behind Eugene Ho. Anyone could see that he was utterly capable of pretty much anything, too. A pair of expensive glasses, a tall, manly physique. He was none other than Eugene Ho's biological older brother, Eugene Song. The heir of parenthood inherit Eugene Construction after Yu Myung-hwan decides to step down in the future. Eugene Song walked real close to Eugene Ho and looked down on his younger brother. Relatives have come, so you should be out there greeting them. How long are you planning to act like a little kid? Whatever. Do remember that your childish actions only paint our father's reputation with dishonor. Eugene Song's tone of voice did not contain a single trace of brotherly affection. No, it was rather openly dismissive. Of course, Eugene Ho didn't like his older brother, but still, he lacked any courage to retort back here. It couldn't be helped, really. Eugene Song was a genius among geniuses who managed to stand on the top of every subject he took on back in school. And it wasn't just his excellent grades, either. After graduating from school, he helped Yu Myung-hwan in various business ventures and achieved incredible success in everything he touched. Compared to him, Eugene Ho didn't have anything to show for. He barely managed to enter the university, for instance. Whenever his older brother stood next to him, Eugene Ho naturally grew small and insignificant. Still as pathetic as you can get. TSK, TSK. Eugene Song frowned deeply while staring at Eugene Ho's lowered head, before changing his expression and walking away in hurried steps. Uncle. Oh, Gene Song, is that you? Only after Eugene Song had gone away did Eugene Ho raise his head back up. This was one of the reasons why he didn't want to come home. Only if there was no stupid ancestral rites ceremony thing. Eugene Ho spat out a lengthy groan, and that was when he heard a sexy, but also rather sharp voice coming from right behind him. Wowzers. What a jerk. Sucks the fun out of this place, that guy. Eugene Ho looked behind him, and he found his cousin/older sister by 1 year, Yu Soo-hyun, standing there. Did you hear what he just said? What a total jerk face. Yu Soo-hyun approached closer before Eugene Ho could react and lightly tapped him on the shoulder. Yu Soo-hyun's forehead creased up rather prettily. Look at you. Come on now. Seriously? TSK, TSK. Still so pathetic. TSK, TSK. Eugene Ho couldn't suppress his laughter after seeing her imitate his older brother. Full hump. Cook. Stop that. I don't feel like cracking jokes with you right now, you know? Still so pathetic. TSK, TSK. Kuhihi. Cook. Arg, I'm telling you, stop it. Their ages were almost the same, so their relationship was more like that of really close friends. Yu Soo-hyun stood right in front of Eugene Ho. Why do you keep acting like this, though? What do you mean? I mean, come on. You're an Awakened now, right? Don't tell me you still can't win against a regular person. FLL0W current novels O/N/O/V/3L/B and .C/O/M. So what if I am? You think you're going to start throwing punches at my older brother or something? Well, not really, no. But Yu Soo-hyun bit on her rather shapely lower lip, imagining the kind of punishment the patriarch of the family might saddle the poor Eugene Ho with if the latter did throw a knuckle sandwich to his much more successful older brother. The prospect of that alone was quite terrifying, to say the least. It wasn't as if she didn't understand Eugene Ho's inner thoughts while he had to remain on the receiving end of the ridicule. Yu Soo-hyun narrowed her eyes and glared in the direction that Eugene Song had disappeared to. Whatever. He's still a stuck-up, no-fun jerk-off, that guy. She too disliked Eugene Song as much as Eugene Ho did. She just so happened to be one of the few people who knew what Eugene Song's real personality was like, hidden beneath that fakey, smiley facade. However, Eugene Ho didn't agree with her. It wasn't because that guy was his older brother, no. No. He simply wanted to win against his older brother in an upfront manner, not badmouth him from behind like this. When Eugene Ho kept his mouth shut, Yu Soo-hyun cautiously asked him, "Hey, so that plan, is it still ongoing? You know, you said you become a guild master. At that guy's expense." Instead of a reply, Eugene Ho simply smiled. Who'd believe him even if he said that out loud? It'd be a relief if no one mocked him or something. Him and his brother battling like that? However, now that he held the huge ace called Hyungnim, the odds of his victory had risen up by quite a lot. If I managed to get the master license, it'd be possible to duke it out with his older brother then. He might even win. Yu Soo-hyun saw the determination burning in Eugene Ho's eyes and spoke in no uncertain terms while placing her hands on her hips. "I'd rather kill myself instead of working for that man. So, you do everything you can, okay? 'Cause I want to fight your old man over this." "Thanks." This was how Yu Soo-hyun would usually cheer him on. She was actually a rank A hunter who started her career as a famous child actor. Even with her background of being a lady or a chaebol was not taken into account, many guilds still tried their darndest to scout her because of her rank and fame. For some reason, though, she had refused all of their offers and continued to act as a model every now and then. However, a new offer that she couldn't really refuse had arrived at her doorstep recently, and that was to become one of the founding members of the soon-to-launch Yujin Guild. It was a direct order from the chairman himself, Yu Myung-hwan. She couldn't outright ignore the orders of the family patriarch, but she also didn't want to work for Eugene Song either. Yu Soo-hyun herself had a lot to worry about now. Although the kid was not all that trustworthy, she had little choice but to place her faith in Eugene Ho. BRRR, BRRR. Hearing the sound of a phone vibrating coming from Eugene Ho's pocket, Yu Soo-hyun asked him, "Aren't you going to answer that?" Oh, he was daydreaming about something else just then. He hurriedly pulled his phone out after it had been ringing for a while. The number appearing on the phone screen was a familiar one. Hyungnim. Eugene Ho's expression brightened up immediately after realizing who it was. "Hello, Hyungnim." He answered the call with an energetic voice. "Yes? Yes, Hyungnim. No, I could be there, no problem. Yes, he'll be there shortly, Hyungnim." Eugene Ho ended the call there. Yu Soo-hyun displayed her interest after sensing Eugene Ho's moods doing a 180. What the heck? Who was that? Too bad for her. This was absolutely not the time for him to stand around leisurely explaining the situation to her. After all, didn't Hyungnim ask him for a favor just now? And with the desire to escape from this place added on top, his mind could only think about leaving as soon as possible, even if it was only a second faster. Let's talk later. Watching Eugene Ho hurriedly run away, Yu Soo-hyun's head tilted from side to side. And why is he so pumped up like that now? Every time he participated in a family meeting of some sort, Eugene Ho always walked around with slumped shoulders, but it was a different story today. How odd. Yu Soo-hyun told herself to definitely interrogate the kid later. While that was happening, Eugene Ho was searching for his father. It'd soon be dinner time, and Eugene Ho couldn't be excused from the family gathering without his father's approval, especially when every single family member and relatives were present. Eugene Ho scanned his surroundings and eventually spotted his father over in the distance, conversing with some people. He had a countenance of a tiger. His personality was just as strict, him never cracking a smile with matters he thought were insignificant. For someone like Eugene Ho, his father was a very difficult person to talk to. And I haven't even started yet. Yet, he was already getting nervous. But he needed to be courageous here. Yeah, well, I made a promise. Eugene Ho took a couple of deep breaths and slowly walked to where his father was. He almost turned around several times on his way, though. However, he held the urges back. And finally, Eugene Ho managed to arrive before his father, Yu Myung-hwan. Father. Their distance was a bit too far for a relationship between a father and a son, though. Yu Myung-hwan shifted his gaze over to Yu Jin-ho. What do you want? Sensing the uncertain air, the people around Yu Myung-hwan distanced themselves all at the same time as if they had a prior agreement. Father, will it be okay if I went out for a little while? Yu Jin-ho's voice lacked any discernible energy as he spoke to his father. I will return before dinner. Yu Myung-hwan stood there with an expression of someone getting ready to scold his disappointing son. But then he let off a sigh and gave his permission, albeit quite unwillingly so. Fine, go, but return on time. Yu Jin-ho's expression brightened and bowed his head. Thank you, father. He then ran out of there like a streak of lightning. Yu Myung-hwan stood there and looked at the back of Yu Jin-ho with a stiff face. Meanwhile, his wife walked closer to him. Dear, I just got a call from Vienna. That was one of the messages had been eagerly waiting for. Yu Myung-hwan immediately shifted his attention over to his wife. And the results of the concours are? She won, of course. She's our daughter, so it's expected, really. A subtle smile formed on Yu Myung-hwan's face, but it disappeared without a trace before anyone had the chance to see it. When will she be returning to Korea? Then? She says that she's far too busy during the semester, but will come around once it ends. Yu Myung-hwan frowned deeply. I told her to attend her grandfather's ancestral ceremony regardless of how busy she was. Dear, children nowadays don't place much importance on such matters anymore. TSK. The madam of the Yu family carefully fixed Yu Myung-hwan's slightly out-of-shape tie and spoke to him intimately. Also, dear, how about paying more attention to Jin-ho? You're speaking about that again. A tiger is supposed to rear tiger cubs, not kittens. Whether he's a tiger or a kitten, he's still my child. And your child, too. Did you notice? After his graduation from middle school, it was Jin-ho's first time smiling in front of you. Did he do that? Yu Myung-hwan fixed his gaze in the direction Yu Jin-ho had disappeared to, his expression showing just the slightest hint of puzzlement. But that lasted only for a brief second. Yu Myung-hwan spoke dismissively. Maybe he found himself a girlfriend. Anyway, others must be waiting for us now. Let's go back inside. Inside the Hunter Association's HQ, located in Seoul's Gyeongju. One of the association's employees was checking various equipment located within the building and came to a sudden stop in front of a miniature magic energy measuring equipment. What the hell? What's wrong with this guy? The number on the display panel should have stayed 0, yet the value was climbing up and down continuously. It was as if it had lost its mind. However, this employee didn't think too much about it. As these measuring equipments were very sensitive, they broke down more often than not. Hey, Kim Gunna. Yes, sir. A subordinate quickly jogged closer. How many gates has this guy measured recently? What is its serial number, sir? It's N1744B. The subordinate scanned through the log and nodded his head. 7 gates, a couple of days ago. A couple of days ago? Let me see. Indeed, it was the truth. 2 days ago, this equipment measured the ranks of 7 gates, and out of them, 4 had been closed by the hunters already. Were there any problems with the gates this guy measured? No, sir. I didn't hear anything. Oh, really? The senior employee slowly scratched the stubble on his chin. Now, normally, when magic measuring equipment like this one was found to be malfunctioning, the raid permits issued for all the gates the faulty device had measured would be rescinded immediately. It was an obvious thing if one thought about it. What would happen to hunters who entered a gate thinking that it was only a rank C, but it turned out to be A or B? None of them would return alive and in one piece. High-ranked dungeons were such places. Just as the boundary between lower-ranked hunters and higher-ranked ones were crystal clear and impossible to bridge, the differences between the higher-ranked dungeons and lower-ranked ones were also quite humongous. It was not for nothing that high-ranked dungeons were all dealt with exclusively by the large guilds until now. Should I send out notices now? Letting others know wasn't all that difficult. However, never mind the discontent voices of anger coming from the teams that paid for the permits. Taking more time to measure the gates again could mean that a dungeon break might occur in the meantime. And if that happened, the association wouldn't be able to dodge the pointed criticism flying in their way. Hell, if things went wrong somewhere, he might even lose his job. I worked so hard to get to this position, too. The Hunter Association received similar levels of treatment to state-run public enterprises. If one wanted to enter this organization, one had to put in as much effort as passing the bar exam, for instance. Just thinking about losing this job, he almost blacked out right there, and then, no freaking way. Nope. He shook his head. The subordinate also more or less knew what the superior's dilemma was. That was why he asked rather cautiously, what should we do now? It'd been 2 days already. If there were problems, shouldn't he have heard about it by now? Let it be. Will it be fine that way? Well, I'm sure nothing much will happen. It's been 2 days already, right? Well, that is true. The subordinate nodded his head. On the report, write that N 1744B was working fine until yesterday, but developed a fault earlier today. Okay, sir. The private residence of the chief of the White Tiger Guild's 2nd Division, on Songmin. He stopped cutting the spring onion and straightened his back, and his bones issued a loud complaint. Crackle. Agu. Today dinner, Dunjang stew. As befitting a bachelor going on 8 years strong, he had mastered the art of cooking a fair number of dishes already. It all happened 5 years ago. Back then, he filled himself up all the time with instant foods, until he realized that his health was rapidly deteriorating and reflected on his stupidity. He made up his mind to learn cooking, and now he was at the level of almost replicating a dish that appeared on the TV in passing. However, didn't they say that end of tuning is pure love? TL. Not sure what this line is supposed to mean, but I TL'd it as it appears in the raw. As his skill grew, the types of dishes that he prepared for himself became simple side dishes, such as today's Dunjang stew. Kaya. Now this is what I'm talking about. On Songmin tasted his own creation and nodded his head as if he was truly amazed by his own skills. Too bad. Only one person could taste this wonderful stew, though. He really felt sorry about that. Should I invite someone over for a meal? He immediately thought of a certain subordinate, but soon shook his head. He was already sick and tired of being called an old bachelor. Yet just what kind of a misunderstanding would he arouse if he invited a fellow male employee? I wonder if he's properly doing the job I gave him. That guy was quite attentive and smart most of the time, yet there was this part of him that was undeniably sloppy, too. Yeah, why am I worried about work even though I'm at home, relaxing? Time to eat his dinner, then. On Songmin placed the Dunjang stew on the coffee table by the living room while humming to himself. It was now a normal thing for him to watch TV in the living room while eating dinner alone. The dining table in the kitchen was far too big and lonesome for a bachelor to have a meal alone there. Click. He switched the TV on with the remote and settled down on the couch. A news broadcast came on. Today's breaking news. One of the main advantages of being a bachelor was that he'd never have to fight someone else for the TV remote. When he turned that boob tube on, it'd always be on the channel he preferred. On Songmin watched the large flat screen TV mounted on the wall with the corner of his eyes while he scooped up a spoonful of rice. The entirety of the United States of America is in deep shock after an unexplainable explosion took place in the American Hunters Association headquarters in Washington, D.C. A rumor is rising among some experts that the explosion was due to a new rising talent causing irreparable friction among S-rank hunters. What is this world coming to, Really now? On Songmin clicked his tongue with a rueful expression, but still didn't forget to carefully choose the side dish that would signal the beginning of his dinner. Well, there weren't that many side dishes to choose from, anyway. Well, it just has to be kimchi, no? This is the CCTV footage recorded near the American Monitoring Division's building. Cracks suddenly formed on the walls of the building, and, not really caring what the news bulletin was saying, the steamy rice resting on top of the spoon now acted as a home for a cold piece of kimchi he took out from the separate kimchi refrigerator. And just as On Songmin was bringing the pear to his mouth, his phone suddenly issued a loud ring. Arg, who the heck is it this time? On Songmin inwardly complained and picked up the smartphone. But he hurriedly answered the phone after discovering who was calling him. Hello, this is On Songmin speaking. The one calling him was, of course, Song Jinwoo. Song Min's expression was bright as he answered the call. While listening to Jinwoo's story, Song Min's expression progressively became puzzled. Pardon me? You were wondering if you could tag along during the training of our new recruits? It's done. Jinwoo ended the call. Initially, Chief Song Min was confused by the sudden request, but once he heard Jinwoo's reasons, he gave his okay rather easily. And now, Jinwoo would be able to check out White Tiger's method of training their new recruits. And I also managed to borrow the van, too. Even though the kid was busy, Jinho still showed up. Jinwoo couldn't help but think that the kid should be praised wholeheartedly. Jinho came running even though he was tied up with something and didn't even forget to greet him properly, too. And so, the preparations were complete. Right now, Jinwoo was standing in front of the apartment building that the problematic female student lived in. It's really close to my own place, isn't it? It only took 2 minutes of walking to get here. It was the proverbial stone's throw away. He took a look around his vicinity, and he was still in a familiar district, too tiny and cramped, with lots of old apartment buildings standing close to one another. Meaning, this girl's family circumstances weren't that good, just how his used to be not too long ago. He could understand where she was coming from, now that she was nominally a hunter. Well, Jinwoo was also like that once upon a time. Too bad, those people die the quickest. Didn't he get injured every single time? Just how many times did he come close to getting killed? If it weren't for his mom suffering from the D*MN rare illness, he'd have quit this crap a long time ago. For a ranky hunter, a dungeon was a horrible place to be in. If left alone, this girl would definitely grow to regret ever being a hunter. No, it'd be more likely that she'd die long before she had the chance to regret making that decision. Of course, that happens all the time, unfortunately. The incidents of hunters dying or getting gravely injured happened dozens of times in a single day. After all, it was impossible to talk all these people out of going on a raid, nor was there any reason to do so. Well, they made their choices, so they had to bear the responsibilities of their decisions accordingly. However, if he didn't know the girl in question, he wouldn't have cared. But now that he knew who she was, he couldn't just ignore this one. Indeed, Jinwoo was rather familiar with this girl. He sensed the presence of a person and raised his head and spotted the problem child walking towards him. Her hair rolled up into a bun above her head. Slightly rough and tired eyes, she was definitely someone he knew. The female student discovered Jinwoo there and tilted her head. What are you doing here, Ajusi? Just as Jinwoo did, the female student also recognized him right away. Yup, this world is indeed too dang small. Jinwoo scratched the side of his head. The female student who declared that she'd become a hunter. She was none other than the underage kid, the lone female in the raiding team Jinho had assembled. The one that briefly caused Jinwoo to worry slightly since she was still so young and all. Is it okay to bring a child here? I asked for professional advice, and apparently, there is no problem according to the law, Hyungnim. Actually, the only reason why people don't hire underage hunters is that there would be hell to pay if something went sideways. Han Song-yi. When he heard that name from GNHS homeroom teacher, a flood of emotions briefly inundated him. So, he just had to confirm it for himself. And sure enough, the date Han Song-yi began missing school coincided with the day Jinho's team began its raiding missions. With that, it kind of became a bit harder to think of this matter as someone else's mess. In a way, he felt responsible for it. As a matter of fact, he couldn't help but wonder if he was the cause of this mess to begin with, after letting a kid who didn't know how the world really operated taste some easy cash and give her false impressions that she was capable of doing anything now. At least, one thing's for sure. No matter what it might be, he'd feel really bad if he heard of Han Song-yi perishing inside a dungeon. He had done nothing wrong, so he shouldn't suffer through a couple of nights' sleep, lost through guilty consciousness. No? And so, he decided to make time for this evening and sort this mess out. It wasn't that difficult to begin with anyway. What's going on? Han Song-yi's eyes opened wider as she stared up at Jinwoo. And then, her expression became rather unimpressed. Wait, could it be that the hunter my teacher wanted to introduce me to was you, Ajusi? Her continuously calling him Ajusi got on his nerve a bit, but Jinwoo maintained his smile and nodded his head. But then, I don't know what my teacher told you, but I'm not interested in going back to school anymore. And I'm definitely not going to give up being a hunter. Han Song-yi curtly stated her position. She seemed to be a quiet kid when she was with the raid team, but her attitude definitely changed when the story involved her. She was definitely one of those headstrong modern kids who thought they knew how to draw the line on where their opinions and viewpoints lied. Well, the thing is, there's a girl back in my house who's exactly like you, you know? Jinwoo grinned slightly. Han Song-yi thought that she had managed to come across tough and intimidating. But seeing that Jinwoo's response was completely out of her expectations, she began to get flustered somewhat. Jinwoo spoke to her in an even tone of voice. I wasn't planning to tell you to quit being a hunter. Han Song-yi's eyes widened further. I'm sorry? Kids like her would always act completely opposite to what you tell them to do. So, he wasn't even planning to talk her out of it. No, all he had was to show her what the reality was like just once. That's what happened to me, anyway. He realized the truth after participating in his first raid. And now his reality was far crueler and heartless than his imagination had been. Han Song-yi did her very best to hide her fluster and asked him, then, what brings you here? Jinwoo took a step closer. Han Song-yi flinched noticeably and was about to retreat a step back. But upon realizing that such an action would make her look weak, she forcibly stopped her body from moving. Jinwoo now stood before Han Song-yi. Although he didn't mean to, and no one would understand the meaning behind it, an ominous smile still found its way to Jinwoo's lips. I'm here to mold you into a better hunter. There was no need to persuade her to accompany him to a dungeon. She said, okay, I'm coming. As soon as he told her that she now had an indelible opportunity to witness how the White Tiger Guild conducted its new recruit training exercise. She didn't even suspect that Jinwoo had any ulterior motives. As they walked to the van, Han Song-yi asked him how he knew her teacher, and he simply showed her the photo of him and Gina stored on the phone. Ah, Juicy, you were Gina H.S. Appa? For a while now, a certain word was really getting on his nerves, but since everything was going according to his plan, he endured it and let it slide. Get in. Thanks. Jinwoo drove Han Song-yi to the location where the White Tiger Guild was holding its evening training. Since he was told that the training exercise would only commence at 9 p.m., there was still plenty of time left. Vroom. The van that was clearly too big for only 2 people glided across the road. Was this because both his agility and perception had been enhanced a great deal? He had never driven a car after getting his driver's license some time ago, yet the actual driving proved to be rather easy. When he concentrated a bit harder, all the other cars on the road looked as slow as worms to him. Yep, stats really come in handy in all sorts of things, don't they? Meanwhile, Han Song-yi asked him from the passenger seat, does Gina really study the whole day, even back home? I mean, I heard rumors that she actually plastered pages of a dictionary on her walls so she can memorize them even when she falls asleep. There was such a rumor about Gina, but she was such a fried chicken-loving sleepyhead when she was at home. Gina HS, just like you, you know. When she's home, all she does is play games, eat, and sleep. Well, it was mostly sleeping, but still. Yeah, that must be a lie. How come her grades are so amazing, then? I can hardly believe it myself. She used to frequent arcades with me back when she was still in middle school, you know? They chatted about this and that, and eventually arrived near the vicinity of the gate. Jinwoo stopped the van. Screech. The area they were in was designated as a location where gates frequently appeared. Almost no human beings dare to live around here anymore, so it was quite convenient to park the van. From what he heard, almost 80% of houses here were deserted. The story went that, once the remaining populace moved out, the whole district would be shut down. Jinwoo and Han Song-yi exited from the van. He scanned the surroundings and immediately picked up on the overflowing amount of eerie, creepy chill in the air. VRRR. For some reason, he thought that he could hear loud cheering coming from the shadow beneath his feet. He was probably imagining it, though. Han Song-yi got a bit scared by the eerie atmosphere of the place, but after spotting the group of hunters in the distance, regained most of her self-confidence back. The way her eyes sparkled, it was as if she had just ran into a super celebrity or something. Oh well, they are hunters from the super guild, White Tiger, so it can't be helped. To a high schooler who yearned to become a real hunter, those people would be no different than actual celebrities, no? Also, such a thought process wasn't so strange to begin with when considering how mass media packaged these hunters on the TV and such. Oh, so you really came? Hyun Ki-cheol quickly ran over to Jin-woo after discovering him. Do you still remember me? Jin-woo lightly nodded his head. Sensing that Hyun Ki-cheol's smile wasn't the fakey business one, but the real thing, a smile also formed naturally on Jin-woo's face as well. They haven't met too many times before, but this Hyun Ki-cheol character seemed to be someone good-natured and easy to talk to. I heard it from the chief. Ah, so this young woman is her? Hello there. Han Sang-yi lowered her head in greeting. While they were saying hellos in this fashion, a big muscular guy sauntered over and spoke in an irked tone of voice. Let's stop with useless chatter and get started already. We didn't come here for a picnic, and it's almost 9 p.m. The muscular guy didn't even wait for the response and walked back towards the gate. Something didn't feel quite right with that guy. So Jin-woo asked Hyun Ki-cheol, "Who was that?" "Oh, he's one of our new recruit. He's ranked A. Actually, he must be feeling a bit unhappy after I asked him for his understanding earlier. He even asked me if I thought that going to a dungeon was a fun pastime or some such." "He's a rank A?" Hyun Ki-cheol nodded his head, thinking that such a reaction was reasonable, coming from a proud rank, a hunter like that guy. Jin-woo asked again, "What are the ranks of today's raid team members?" 1 rank A, 7 rank BS, and 4 rank CS, for the total of 12 members. A rank A and several BS, just for a rank C dungeon. Well, their ranks might be high, sure, but they're still newbies, you see. We're trying to help them earn first-hand experience inside an easier dungeon. Hyun Ki-cheol spoke with some pride in his voice. He then added quickly that after today, these guys would immediately be inserted into high-ranked dungeons, meaning they could definitely be counted as a proper combat force. Still, 1A and 7 BS, huh? Jin-woo's expression subtly changed. Actually, this was the reason why Chief on Songmin gave his permission. He was thinking of convincing Jin-woo with a mighty display from the White Tiger Guild's new talented recruits. However, quite contrary to On Songmin's and Hyun Ki-cheol's expectations, Jin-woo could only look on at the gate with a disappointed expression. The gate was rated at C. Compared to that, the members of the raiding team were simply too brilliant to the point that they were even blinding the onlookers with their auras. If the raid is too easy, the shock factor will lessen, though. That was what his main worry was about. But he slowly shook his head. No, wait. If she sees it with her own eyes, she should still be able to feel it. Feel how weak and powerless a rank he would become inside a dungeon. That alone would be sufficient. When can we enter? Still utterly oblivious to Jin-woo's real intentions, Han Sang-yi began whining already. When Jin-woo took a look at her, her expression showed how pumped up she was. Let's see how long you can keep that up. Jin-woo inwardly swallowed his laughter and spoke to Hyun Ki-cheol. We'll be on our way now. Ah, yes. Wait, hold up for a second, please. Hyun Ki-cheol sneaked a glance around him and then whispered something to Jin-woo's ears. Excuse me, Song Jin-woo hunted him. If you decide to step in, today's raid will become too easy, so please refrain from doing anything in there. Please? Since Jin-woo's purpose today was to simply observe, obviously he wouldn't enter the fray. I won't step in. He'd be going around other rank C dungeons with Eugene-ho from tomorrow onwards. So what point was there for him to disrupt the White Tiger's training exercise? Of course, had used his shadow soldiers to conquer those dungeons. For that reason alone, he had to bring Han Sang-yi over here. Besides, I don't feel like revealing my shadow soldiers with a matter this simple, either. If he showed how easy it was to clear a dungeon with his shadows busy beating monsters to bloody messes, there was a real danger that Han Sang-yi's delusions of grandeur might get inflated instead. And so, Jin-woo and Han Sang-yi approached the gate. Unlike that rank A hunter, there were some people who welcomed the duo rather happily. Hello, nice to meet you. Since they weren't here to make money, the higher the head count, the better it would be for everyone. As it was customary, They introduced each other. But when it was the turn of the rank a hunter, I don't care. He simply walked inside the gate. Well, let's get going as well. The new recruits of the White Tiger also began entering the gate one by one. Before Han Songyi entered, she turned her head to look at Jin Woo. What about you, Ajusi? Jin Woo crossed his arms and replied to her. After I see you enter first. Han Songyi's face was stiff with nervousness, but she still resolutely nodded her head and jumped into the gate. Jin Woo took a quick breath and stood before the gate. He sensed someone looking at him, so turned around to confirm, only to spot Hyun Ki-chul over yonder, waving at him and cheering him on. He reverted his gaze back to the gate. However, the surface of the gate continued to ripple softly nonstop. But shouldn't the surface return to being a solid black barrier once a person goes through it? Right now, it was continuously rippling about like the surface of water. Something was off here. Jin Woo placed the tip of his hand against the surface, and it reacted like a sticky liquid, clinging to his fingers and following him as he lifted his hand away. Could this be? Jin Woo quickly spun his head around and met Hyun Ki-chul's gaze. At this point, even Hyun Ki-chul had sensed something was very wrong. Jin Woo loudly shouted at him, "Call your main raid team. Hurry." As soon as he finished shouting, Jin Woo was automatically sucked into the gate. What the hell was that? Vice Chief Hyun Ki-chul hurriedly ran towards the gate. The 3 remaining employees of White Tiger Guild also hurriedly followed after him. Once he got to the gate, though, Hyun Ki-chul began freaking out. This can't be. Hunters weren't the only newbies today. The new employees were also brought along in order to train them as well. So, none of the newbies had experienced anything remotely like this. The trio of new employees looked at Hyun Ki-chul with completely stunned expressions. Vice Chief, the gate's surface, it's changing to a red color. As if a drop of blood had fallen in it, the surface of the once black gate was now slowly changing to the crimson-red color. Hyun Ki-chul ignored the confused employees and hurriedly called someone. Click. Ki-chul, Chief, it's the red gate. The gate our people just walked in to change to a red gate. What? On Song-min's voice became urgent, shocked. What are you talking about? How can a rank C change to a F*King red gate? Hyun Ki-chul raised his head and stared at the gate, now dyed completely in the color of blood. The ripples on the surface had stopped now, too. Hyun Ki-chul nervously swallowed his dried saliva. I don't know how, but it's definitely a red gate, Chief. What? A red gate? Just what on earth is going on here? The CEO of the White Tiger Guild, Baek Yun-ho, ran straight to the gate's location as soon as he received the urgent call. The complexion of Hyun Ki-chul could only be described as ashen. Well, sir, I'm going to see for myself first. Baek Yun-ho walked past the guild employees who looked like they were in the middle of a funeral. It really is a red gate. Baek Yun-ho's own complexion hardened instantly after checking out the gate's color. What was a red gate? It was a terrifying phenomenon where the dungeon beyond it would actually connect to a whole new world, not some underground cavern. And in order to escape from it, either you had to kill the boss of the area or wait for the dungeon break to occur. In other words, once you stepped inside, it'd be the end. Once the gate changed its color to red, all external influences would be completely cut off. Escaping from it and trying to enter it, both of these activities were now impossible. Baek Yun-ho pressed his hand against the gate's surface, as he thought it was hard impossible to enter. God D***M in it. From here onwards, there was no way to lend aid to those trapped inside. Baek Yun-ho asked Hyun Ki-chul, I thought this was supposed to be a rank C gate? Sir, it was a rank C. Did you call the association to confirm it? Yes, sir. However, the association is insisting that it's still a rank C gate. Those goddamn sons of betches. Those goddamn sons of B. Cheese. Baek Yun-ho angrily cussed out. A red gate would only occur when the dungeon itself was ranked very high. To begin with, there was a whole new world on the other side of the gate, yet the leaking magical energy only equaled that of a rank C dungeon. That crap wouldn't fly anywhere. Even from a casual glance, he could tell this thing should have been ranked B at the bare minimum. If unlucky, rank A. Or worse, something even higher than that. However, the only reason why the association still had the audacity to insist they were not wrong? Sir, should we use our own equipment to measure the magic energy? When Hyun Ki-cheol asked him, Baek Yun-ho shook his head. No magic energy leaks out from a red gate, so it's impossible to measure it now. Because it would be almost impossible to take another measurement. That was why. There was no concrete way to find out what the problematic gate's actual rank was at this point in time. And besides, the rank of this D***Min gate wasn't important anymore. How many of our people went in there? Total of 12, sir. How many are high-rank hunters? As the leader, rank A Kim Cheol Hunternim, and there are also 7 rank B hunters as well. 1 rank A and 7 rank BS. The new recruits. Will they be all right? Baek Yun-ho slowly shook his head. We don't have a choice but to think of them as all Kia. If lucky, the rank A and 2, 3 rank BS might make out alive. Only if those trapped inside enjoy Lady Luck's blessing. That was how lacking these numbers were. With the current composition of the raid team, this should only be enough to barely conquer the weakest of rank B dungeons. Anything tougher than that, and you'd be asking for way too much. Without some kind of miracle, the odds of their new recruits returning alive was as good as none. Baek Yun-ho's complexion darkened even further. Hyun Ki-cheol studied the mood of his boss and cautiously opened his mouth. Sir, actually, there was someone else who also entered the gate along with our recruits. Baek Yun-ho shifted his gaze to his subordinate, his expression changing slightly. Could it be that a high-ranking hunter was in the vicinity and entered along with the team after getting curious about the training process? What else could qualify as a miracle? This would certainly be it. Baek Yun-ho's voice rose up. Who was that person? He's the hunter I've been trying to scout for the last few days, sir. The reply came from behind, instead. When Baek Yun-ho and Hyun Ki-cheol looked over to confirm who it was, they spotted On Song-min, soaked in his own sweat and breathing roughly. Apologies for being late, sir. The traffic was unexpectedly heavy. On Song-min's home was furthest from everyone here, so he ended up arriving last. On Song-min shifted his gaze over to the gate. The red gate reminded him of the entrance to an impregnable fortress. Just looking at it made it harder to breathe. However, if it's Hunter Song Jin-woo then, a man who overcame several incidents already unscathed could potentially create a new miracle all by himself. That's what he thought. Baek Yun-ho hurriedly approached On Song-min. Are you saying that the hunter you've been keeping an eye on is in there, too? Is that it? Yes, sir. Baek Yun-ho suddenly recalled something. Now that I think about it, Chief On had been rather busy lately. And as it so happened, there was a hunter he had been trying to scout to the guild. Chief On's instincts were almost always never wrong. What if? A spark of hope was lit in Baek Yun-ho's heart. What is his rank? Is it A? Or maybe AB? If this hunter was ranked S, then Baek Yun-ho would have known the identity of this mystery hunter. There were less than 10 rank S hunters in the whole of South Korea, after all. However, On Song-min was shaking his head. Oh my god. Baek Yun-ho's hardened face finally brightened up considerably. Are you saying that a rank S hunter also went in there? On Song-min calmly replied. No, sir. He's a rank E. Almost right away, Baek Yun-ho's expression crumpled to a man who accidentally chewed on bugs. Jin-woo couldn't help but get flustered here. Could this be the gate that supposedly takes you to another world? It'd be his first time experiencing one, but he had read all about it online from the testimonies of those who managed to survive it. And they all said the same thing, that it felt like they were being sucked in. Jin-woo had to agree with that assessment too. As soon as the gate sucked him in, a deep darkness swallowed him, and a little while later, he felt like he was being slid across something slick and smooth. Heek! When he opened his eyes, he was standing in the middle of a wintry forest, completely covered in white snow. What is this place? This doesn't look like the interior of a dungeon, does it? Hey, look, the gates disappeared too. Other hunters were looking around in confusion, unable to hide their panic as well. While they were getting more and more flustered, Jinwoo calmed himself down, narrowed his eyes, and scanned the surrounding area. I don't sense anything suspicious. Thanks to the system repeatedly sending him to weird places, Jinwoo had gotten used to being in an unexpected foreign environment, which also meant that he could gain his calmness quickly. The first thing that entered his view was a huge tree. Not just one, but countless coniferous trees, the kind never seen before on Korean soil, were shooting up straight to the sky with nary a visible gap in between them. As he scanned his surroundings, his eyes ran into someone else's. And it was the rank a hunter Kim Cheol, who was also cautiously scanning the vicinity like him. The two of them glared at each other for a little while before looking away. Han Song-yi had approached him and began tugging at his clothes in the meantime. Excuse me, something bad happened just now, right? She looked really scared. Her previous self-confidence was nowhere to be found. But then Jinwoo's hand suddenly shot out towards Han Song-yi's face. Han Song-yi's eyes opened super wide. Grab! The arrow caught in Jinwoo's hand trembled continuously as if it lamented missing its target. And that would be the middle of Han Song-yi's forehead. Finally realizing what just happened, her face paled in an instant. However, the expected scream came from somewhere else. Kaiwak. Most uptod / at Nvels a / republished on in Revelja c/o/m. Yuwak. Plop. A male hunter fell to the snowy ground with blood bubbling out of his mouth. An arrow lodged deep in his temple. The snowy ground was soon dyed in his blood. Hunters began gasping out in shock. 2 arrows flew in at the same time. One aimed at Han Song-yi, while the other one hit its mark. Because of that, though no one saw Jinwoo catching the other arrow. Over there, it's those B** starts. One of the rank B hunters pointed towards the top of a tree located far away. But even before he had begun pointing his finger, both the gazes of Jinwoo and Kim Cheol were fixed there. They could see 2 life forms standing over there on the snow-covered branches. 2 people? No, I should say 2 creatures, huh? Long white hair, icy white skin, and silver eyes. And the race-specific trait of pointy ears. These monsters were famed for their particularly beautiful countenances, as well as for their rarity, as they could only be encountered in high-ranked dungeons. Icells, also known as white phantoms. TL, the author used pun here. The Korean letter for phantom can also mean ear. Those who had never encountered one referred to them as icells, but the hunters who did encounter them and fought with them all took to calling them white phantoms instead, while also adding that a pretty name like elf shouldn't be mixed together with these abominable creatures. Jinwoo could immediately guess why the hunters before him all gnashed their teeth at the mere mention of the white phantoms. They're laughing at us, huh? The 2 archers had lowered their bows, and disgusting smiles were clearly visible on their faces. It was as if they were staring at a table full of delicacies and couldn't decide which one to start eating. And you decided on this, huh? Jinwoo's eyes narrowed to a slit. 1 arrow to the far left, and another one to the far right. That was no coincidence. The hunter with an arrow stuck in his head was a 30-something who had gone through the awakening process only recently. With the exception of Han Song-yi, he'd be the weakest of the group. As for the other arrow, it was aimed at Han Song-yi. Indeed, the arrows were meant for the 2 weakest members of the team. If it weren't for the system, I'd be the one with an arrow stuck in my head instead. The cheap tactic of the white phantoms certainly managed to bring out Jinwoo's ire. He raised the caught arrow so the creatures could see and broke it in half. Crack! Perhaps taking that as a challenge. The white phantom who shot that arrow pointed at Jinwoo and drew a line under his chin. Seeing that, Jinwoo simply smirked. However, his eyes were definitely not laughing. I'll kill you with my own hands. Receiving the trivial provocation of the monster, Jinwoo simply glared coldly as his reply. Soon, the pair of white phantoms disappeared below the tree. Looks like this is their way of welcoming us. Finally, Kim Cheol opened his mouth. The lone rank A of the group opened his mouth, prompting everyone to focus their gazes on him as if they had made an agreement prior to coming here. Actually, he was the leader of this raid team, so that might have been it, though. I'm sure some of you have realized it by now. This is inside the Red Gate. Kim Cheol spoke as if it was the most obvious thing in the whole world. Of course, no one complained about that, which means no one will be able to enter here after us until either we all die or there's a dungeon break. The group all gasped out softly. You. The fact that they could no longer hope for a rescue came across as a big mental shock. Meanwhile, Kim Cheol continued on. If we remain here, we'll all die from this freezing cold or from those ** stards ambushing us. However, I'm going to clear this place and get out of here by myself if necessary. Are there any of you who wish to join me? Kim Cheol's powerful, confident stare and his broad shoulders imparted a certain sense of trust. Hunters glanced at each other for a bit before unanimously voicing their desire to travel together with him. Let's move together. I'd like to join you. Let's go back together alive. I want to help too. However, Kim Cheol shoved away the chest of the male hunter who said he wanted to help. Kiak, even though he controlled his physical strength, at the end of the day, he was still a rank A. The male hunter retreated several steps back, a deep frown etched on his face from the immense pain coming from his chest. Excluding you. Excuse me? And also you and you. Kim Cheol pointed to a few more others, not just that male hunter. Of course, both Jin Woo and Han Song-yi were included in that. It was here that Jin Woo's own forehead creased up ever so slightly. All in all, 5 people in total. They were all either rank C or lower. It's unfortunate, but I won't be taking you along. What did you say? Do you know anything about Red Gates? The male hunter shook his head at Kim Cheol's question. In here, 1 day equates to 1 hour outside. The worst-case scenario, ITLL takes several months for the dungeon break to occur, or I kill the boss. Under that kind of situation, I can't walk around with baggage like you. We're baggage to you. The hunters who were pointed out by Kim Cheol got all riled up, but once the rank A hunter glared at them, they all shut their mouths close. Kim Cheol continued on, now sounding as if he was being considerate and all. Don't feel too bad, however. If all of you manage to survive until we kill the boss, then all of you will go back home alive too. Even still, the singled-out hunters sent out desperate, pleading stares to the hunters near Kim Cheol, but not a single one stepped forward. No, they were far too busy avoiding meeting the gazes. It was then, excuse me, a rank B female hunter from Kim Cheol's group raised her hand. Kim Cheol turned to look at her, and she pointed at Jin Woo. It's fine to go over there from here, right? Do what you want. She didn't even look back once and walked straight to Jin Woo's side. Kim Cheol alternated his gaze between the woman and Jin Woo and smirked derisively before declaring out loudly, "We got an opening this side, so I'll accept one more person. Mimi." The male hunter who got shoved away by Kim Cheol just now hurriedly ran over, fearing that the lone rank A in the group and the leader might change his mind. Well, that was how it should be. Jin Woo thought as much. Yup, this woman is the strange one here. Jin Woo stared at the woman, now standing next to him with a puzzled expression on his face. Her gaze met with Jin Woo's, and she whispered in a low voice so no one else could hear. That man Kim Cheol? Well, he couldn't see the arrow flying in, you see. Even if one was a high-ranked hunter, there was no way every stat of his would be developed equally. For instance, he might be a rank A, but his agility could be low. Jin Woo knew how stats worked, so he didn't think too much about that. So what are you saying? Then, the woman smiled refreshingly. I'm guessing you're not a rank E. Am I right? In front of the Red Gate. Baek Yinho's expression remained gloomy. On Songmin provided a short summary on who Song Jin Woo was, but his anxiety level hadn't decreased by one bit. In the end, that's all speculation, isn't it? V/backslash ISSDN 0V L/B and / for the B/est novel reading expiry /N/C. Yes, sir. You're right. On Songmin readily accepted that assessment. It was true that he didn't know anything about Song Jin Woo, after all. But if the boss checked Hunter Song Jin Woo out with his own eyes, he'd have changed his mind right away. There was something different about Song Jin Woo, and the fact that he couldn't adequately describe that with words frustrated on Songmin to no end. Baek Yunho's gaze shifted back to the red gate. In the end, the only person I can believe in is Kim Cheol. It was then. Sir, there won't be any problems with Hunter Kim Cheol, I assure you. One more person butted in among the group of Baek Yunho, On Song-min, and Hyun Ki-cheol. The gazes of three men automatically shifted in that direction simultaneously. It was Ju Song-chan, chief of the 1st Division of the White Tiger Guild. He scanned the three people in front and spoke in a proud voice. I've been training Hunter Kim Cheol quite strictly, so he could be ready for all contingencies. Originally, the initial training of new recruits was left to the 2nd Division, but the 1st Division would be in charge of the awakened ranked A or higher. Those promising individuals who were scheduled to enter the ranks of the main combat force soon got to enjoy a different starting point from everyone else. Seeing Ju Song-chan's confidence, Baek Yunho's expression softened slightly. How are Hunter Kim Cheol's grades? They are excellent, sir. Just his combat capabilities alone had not fall behind anyone from the current members of the guild's main combat force. Is that so? A smile managed to return to Baek Yunho's lips. Kim Cheol was a rank A. Even among high-ranked hunters, he was a talent that must be held on to. If, as the leader of this raid team, he commanded the rank B hunters well and managed to clear this gate, there would be some losses among the rank C hunters, but from the White Tiger's perspective, the survival of high-ranked hunters came first. It's a relief that Hunter Kim Cheol's abilities are top-notch. The weakened sparks of hope regained some life again. Ju Song-chan managed to calm the boss man down and narrowed his eyes at On Song-min, clearly in derision. From what I heard just now, a ranky hunter who might have gone through a reawakening process. Was it? You were saying something about that. Ju Song-chan snorted dismissively. My Hunter Kim Cheol should prove to be more effective than someone like that. A hunter with no proven qualities. On Song-min's expression hardened. He was being looked down on here. However, he didn't raise his voice and let anger take over him. Let's just wait and see who's correct at the end of the day. The four men shifted their gazes at the same time over to the red gate that had trapped their hunters. Woo-woo. The crimson light oozing from the gate seemed especially more ominous than ever before. I'm guessing you're not a ranky. Am I right? The female hunter asked Jin Woo quite openly. Jin Woo opened his mouth in response. Well then, let me ask you something as well. Of course. Jin Woo shifted his gaze over to Kim Cheol and the hunters gathering around him. They were busy planning their next move before they got going. You guys, you're supposed to be new recruits. Yet how can you be this calm? The first thing we've been taught is that anything can happen inside a dungeon. You see, anything could happen inside a dungeon, she said. Jin Woo knew this fact better than anyone here. Actually, every one of us has been trained properly, especially that Kim Cheol over there. He even received a special training regime, too. He's scheduled to join up with the White Tiger's main combat force. They didn't fear dungeons because they had received prior training. Jin Woo could only be flabbergasted by that revelation. And then, almost right away, he realized that all of these people were no different from Han Song-yi. She said that they had been sufficiently trained or whatever, but just what kind of uses would that have here? They were simply showing off without realizing how terrifying a dungeon could become. Knowing something and experiencing it are two different things. More so, when your fragile belief of you knowing everything about dungeons develops just a tiny little crack, it all come crashing down like a dam, with a hole getting swept away by the deluge of water. Building up one's confidence took a long time, but breaking it down only took a single moment. He could see the fate in store for Kim Cheol's team already. They might look okay from the outside, but in the end, they were all helpless noobs. You still haven't answered me, though. Excuse me? After hearing that, Jin Woo's gaze shifted back to the strange woman. My question. You haven't answered it yet. The question about whether he was a rank E or not. She seemed to be a rather tenacious customer, this woman. Why should I tell you that? He replied in a blunt and a bit curt manner, but the female hunter, Park Hui-jin, was now crying out in elation and clenched her fist. Inwardly, of course, Park Hui-jin had met many people in her life, and she immediately knew what Jin Woo's response meant. And that would be his unbridled confidence. Yes, I didn't see it wrong. There was another thing that gave her even more assurance. While she was being trained back in a White Tiger Guild, she had often witnessed the movements of many high-ranked hunters. However, Jin Woo's hand just now. She had never seen anyone move as quickly as Jin Woo's hand catching that arrow. I mean, all I could do was to barely confirm what just happened. Even with my eyesight, she used to be a top-tier athlete before becoming a melee-type hunter through her awakening, so she was pretty confident of her dynamic vision. Park Hui-jin's eyes began sparkling. This guy, he's at least rank A, or even higher than that. In order to ascertain a more definite answer, Park Hui-jin asked him again. Don't be like that now. Can't you tell me, please? Don't feel like it. That was the end of their conversation. Jin Woo turned his head away. He definitely didn't feel like being in the receiving end of endless stream of questions, and also, Kim Cheol was walking closer to them as well. Jin Woo's eyes and Kim Cheol's met. We will. Kim Cheol's voice was harsh, low. Didn't matter what he was trying to convey here. He sounded threatening and menacing. Stop be using the road. He didn't saunter over here just to declare which path they would be using, though. No. Kim Cheol's eyes were asking what Jin Woo's group would do, along with the hidden threat of don't you dare follow us. Jin Woo scanned his surroundings once more, before reverting his gaze back to Kim Cheol. And we will be going through the forest. They'll wish you luck. Well, you guys will be the ones needing that luck later on, though. Jin Woo didn't mouth his inner thoughts, however. Sure thing. You too. With that, Jin Woo's group headed towards the forest. After ensuring that the group had completely disappeared into the forest, Kim Cheol began guffawing out uncontrollably. What a bunch of idiots. Look over there. Kim Cheol uncrossed his arms and pointed towards some trees. Not just one or two, either everywhere he pointed at, trees bore the scars that suspiciously looked like claw marks of potentially gigantic creatures. Isn't that? It's a bear. An ice bear. A bear-type monster. Infamous among all the beast-type monsters as the most ferocious. Those claw marks were them marking their territory. The hunters in Kim Cheol's group saw those and clicked their tongues. TSK. It'd been better if they stayed put here and waited till the end. Looks like innocent people will die because of a rank E taking the lead. I mean, would that rank E have received any prior training like us? Kim Cheol stared at the forest and chuckled derisively. That's to be expected from a measly rank E. Wait. Suddenly, Kim Cheol's smile disappeared. Most of that group is rank CS, and there's a rank B among them too. So how come? How come he thought Jin Woo was that group's leader? Indeed, he hadn't felt that anything was amiss, right up until he realized this weird incongruency by himself. Still, Kim Cheol shook his head. Well, it doesn't matter. They were all going to die soon, anyway. Worrying about themselves took precedence over what would happen to the weaklings who wouldn't last for long, to begin with. There was nothing he could do about the dead, but well, shouldn't the ones that were supposed to live on? Kim Cheol turned towards the road and spoke up. Let's depart. Jin Woo took the lead and walked up ahead. But before long, Park Hui-jin stood in front of him. What is it? Have you lost your mind? Jin Woo crossed his arms and displayed how unhappy he was to hear that. Meaning, she'd have to be careful with her follow-up. Perhaps she understood Jin Woo's warning. Park Hui-jin's voice had softened somewhat. I'm sorry, but I need to say this. Park Hui-jin's finger pointed towards one of the surrounding trees. Can you see that? There was a huge claw mark on the tree's bark. Over there, too. And there. Almost every single tree had their barks greatly damaged, and it was hard to find one that was still intact. This entire place is full of the bear's territorial markings, you know? This entire forest is the bear-type monster's habitat. Dogs or apes were weaker than tigers or lions. Such logic also applied to monsters as well. The tiger or lion-type monsters were much more difficult to fight against when compared to dog or ape-type monsters. So, what about a bear-type then? A bear, a polar bear no less, was seen as one of the strongest carnivorous land animals out there. And right now, Jin Woo's group had entered a forest where monsters based on such animals were residing. Of course, Park Hui-jin would get angry. We need to go back right now, before the monsters show up. TSK. Jin Woo clicked his tongue. What's this? Park Wee-jin thought that Jin-woo would show one of the three responses: get angry, get stunned, or accept what she told him. Unfortunately for her, her expectation was wide off the mark. She was the one advising him against the irrational and hasty decision here. Yet it was Jin-woo looking at her as if she was the idiot. Why is he looking at me like that? Park Wee-jin's face reddened up from anger. What is it? Her voice rose up again. Jin-woo spat out a long sigh and opened his mouth. It's difficult to find a tree without the territorial markings, which means that there are more than one or two ice bears here. Yes? That is why we must go BA. That is precisely why we're moving through the forest. Park Wee-jin's eyes went round in confusion. She still doesn't get it even with that massive hint? Jin-woo had little choice but to tell it straight to her. When we're moving through the forest, we only have to worry about ice bears. Only then did Park Wee-jin understood Jin-woo's intention. The meaning behind lots of ice bears was simple: that there were no other monsters strong enough to hunt ice bears in this forest. To be more precise, the group didn't have to worry about fighting monsters stronger than ice bears here. Why haven't I thought about that? Park Wee-jin became ashamed about shouting at Jin-woo just now. Her head dropped low, even the skin of her neck reddening up from embarrassment. Jin-woo continued to click his tongue. The whole reason why a dungeon was a scary place was that no one knew what might pop out when you were inside. Well, you wouldn't be able to come up with a plan if you didn't know what kind of enemies were waiting for you there. However, didn't the enemies of this place graciously reveal themselves already? Bear-type monsters, is it? Jin-woo didn't know how strong these ice bears were, but he was sure of them being weaker than those two white phantom archers. They were wearing clothing that looked to be made out of bear felt. That was why I had chosen the forest route. He was thinking of traversing the forest and increasing his level, and at the same time, keep an eye out on Kim Cheol's group and the movements of the White Phantoms while waiting for his chance to act. That was the safest way available. Abruptly, Jin-woo became rather puzzled by what he saw. Why is your face still so red? Park Wee-jin's face was far too red to be normal. She couldn't raise her head and managed to squeeze out a voice that was smaller than a buzzing mosquito. It's because too cold. Phew! Jin-woo spat out a long groan and summoned his store. He quickly browsed through the items for sale and spotted thick fur coats and shoes designed for winter. Tiering. Item: warm fur coat. Rarity: none. Type: miscellaneous. Warms up the wearer's body. Price: 10 gold. Item: warm boots. Once worn, provides warmth to wearer's feet. Fur coat and the shoes cost 10 gold each. Unlike items with added effects, regular items didn't cost a lot to buy. No, compared to the amount of gold in his possession, they were oh so cheap. Remaining gold: 431,930. Still, I'd never have guessed that I have to buy Japtum with my gold. Jin-woo chose buy for all of them. Since he couldn't just give to some and ignore others, Jin-woo spent 100 gold and bought the articles of clothing for all 5 people. Poof! 5 coats and 5 pairs of boots suddenly popped up in front of his eyes. And of course, the eyes of all 4 people, excluding Jin-woo, all grew super wide. Heek! What the heck? Was it separate space magic? Park Wee-jin was taken aback, too, and she hurriedly raised her head to look at Jin-woo. Not caring whether they were shocked or not, Jin-woo spoke to them disinterestedly. Put them on. He finished speaking and reached down to grab the closest fur coat, but then Han Song-yi suddenly grasped his sleeve. When their gazes met, Han Song-yi asked him while looking rather scared and confused. Juicy, just what's going on with you? You managed to catch that arrow, and now you use some strange magic to take these clothes out, too. Frowns formed on the forehead of Jin-woo. It didn't take a genius to figure out that, at this rate, he'd be swarmed by the endless streams of questions and get irritated to no end. Right, let's use this chance to clearly draw the line. Jin-woo raised his voice and spoke in a firm voice. Han Song-yi, I brought you here with me, so I will take full responsibility and protect you. However, Jin-woo's voice became colder next. Don't ask me about anything. Jin-woo then swept his gaze against Park Wee-jin as well as other hunters tagging along. The same goes for the rest of you. Do not ask me anything, and do not demand anything from me. He didn't stop there, though. If you don't like it, then you can just leave now. I won't stop you. The two male hunters originally didn't choose to follow Jin Woo, but only tagged along because of the rank B Park Hui-jin. They alternated their gazes between the fur coats and Jin Woo, before hurriedly shaking their heads. There was one more thing, one more reason why Jin Woo chose the forest route. Status window. Name, Song Jin Woo. Level, 51. Class, Shadow Sovereign. Title, The One Who Overcame the Adversity, Extra 1. Jin Woo silently summoned his status window and swapped his current title from the one who overcame the adversity to that of the Slaughterer of Wolves. Title, Slaughterer of Wolves, Extra 1. A title given to a hunter skilled in hunting wolves. When facing animal-type monsters, all of your stats will increase by 40%. A chance to abuse this plainly cheating buff had fallen on his laps. So why should he go anywhere else now? Tiering. An animal-type monster has appeared. The effect of the current title will activate. A smile crept up on Jin Woo's face after he confirmed his stat values, shooting up. Nice. It was then. The hunters all began screaming out, loudly. It's the bear. It's the ice bear. An ice bear that had picked up on the sense of humans was slowly trudging towards the group. These humans were its enemies that had invaded its territory. Obviously, it did not look too kindly towards the intruders. Growl. The ice bear bared its fangs transparent like ice and slowly raised its massive frame on its hind legs. Its huge and hulking figure completely filled up the hunter's vision. The creature did resemble a polar bear, but it was almost twice the size, and a magic crystal, the symbol of all monsters, could be seen in the middle of its chest area, as if it was some kind of a proud emblem. Roar. It roared out furiously, the ground seemingly quaking under its might. All the hunters, excluding Jin Woo, all froze stiff on the spot after hearing the ice bear's roar. Park Hui-jin's expression crumpled unsightly. Oh, so we only need to be mindful of ice bears, was it? How could anyone say that sort of nonsense after seeing that monster? She almost fell for Song Jin Woo's pretty convincing argument. But upon seeing an ice bear, she was certain of one thing. We definitely shouldn't have chosen the forest route. Sensing the approaching danger to the group, Park Hui-jin stepped out in front of the group and shouted out. They'll draw its attention towards me, so everyone must kaya. The scruff of Park Hui-jin's neck was yanked back by considerable force, and she had to backstep several times to make sure that she didn't end up on her butt. After somehow regaining her balance, she raised her head only to find Jin Woo standing before her. Hey, what was that all about? Jin Woo pointed at Park Hui-jin. I'm telling you this right now. They'll be killing all the monsters from now on. Obviously, he couldn't let anyone steal his experience points. Now, could he? For Jin Woo, these bears were perfect health tonics to buff him up for his inevitable showdown with the true enemies of this place, the White Phantoms. Park Hui-jin couldn't hide her astonishment. Did he just yank me back because he wants to monopolize the monster? The other two male hunters, who so happened to be mage types, also stopped casting their spells in sheer dumbfoundedness. No matter how strong you think you are, that thing is a monster of a high-ranked dungeon. Completely ignoring Park Hui-jin's furious voice coming from behind him, Jin Woo walked right towards the ice bear. Well, it's not going to be okay to use daggers for this one. The blood splatter would make a mess of things, wouldn't it? Jin Woo had already summoned his two daggers almost out of reflex, but stored them back in his inventory. Instead, he clenched his fists tightly. Well, I promised to just observe, but this is an emergency, so I'm sure they'll understand. Right? Jin Woo's glare collided midair with the ice bear's. Roar. The ice bear swung its telephone pole-thick front arm towards Jin Woo like a streak of lightning. Swish dash. However, the attack only swiped at the empty air. Why is it so fast compared to its size? Jin Woo was already above the ice bear's head. It was here that he kind of understood the reason for this monster's infamy. Even then, he also sensed that all his level-ups until now weren't in vain. Before the ice bear could lift its head up, Jin Woo punched with all his might right in the middle of the monster's forehead. Kaboom! The head of the ice bear slammed down on the snowy ground with an explosive force. Its skull was completely obliterated, with its limp tongue hanging outside the slack maw. The ice bear stopped moving completely. Level up. Hell yeah. He was thinking that his level up was just around the corner, and now he was glad to have stopped Park Hui-jin from taking any action. You, just what are you? Jin-woo heard that trembling voice and looked behind him, only to spot four speechless faces staring back at him. Jin-woo sheepishly scratched the side of his head. I warned them earlier because I didn't want to run into this sort of situation. It seemed that a person would become rather forgetful whenever he or she witnessed something utterly beyond their capacity to understand. Left with little choice, Jin-woo had to state his position once more. I told you, I'll not tolerate anyone asking me questions. If you're unhappy with my methods, then... Jin-woo pointed his finger in the direction of Kim Cheol's team. You can always go that way. Only then did Park Hui-jin regain her senses, and her facial expression changed. You think he'll leave your side after seeing how you one-punched that ice bear? Honestly, Park Hui-jin was now overflowing with joy. She only chose to follow this youth because her gut feeling said he'd be a better option than Kim Cheol. But holy cow, she quickly discovered that she had quite literally stumbled onto an unexpected jackpot here. She was blessed with a quick head, so it was easy to come to a conclusion. If she really wanted to get out of this place alive, then she had to follow Song Jin-woo. She feared that Song Jin-woo might suggest they go their separate ways. So she hurriedly made a suggestion first, her heart beating anxiously. Mr. Jin-woo, please take over the leader's position. We'll definitely follow every one of your commands from now on. Well, I did say I wouldn't humor their demands at all, but... Jin-woo pondered for a bit before nodding his head. Thinking about the near future, it seemed that this arrangement would prove to be convenient for him. Park Hui-jin looked behind her. The student named Han Song-yi was someone Song Jin-woo brought along, so there was no need to ask her. So, that left the two male hunters. I'm sure you two also agree with my suggestion, yes? The two hunters, now being on the receiving end of the unexpected stare, alternated their gazes between the corpse of the ice bear and Jin-woo, before hurriedly nodding their heads. Once more, in front of the red gate, Hyun Ki-cheol used his handkerchief to wipe away the cold sweat from his brows, his eyes locked on his watch. Baek Yun-ho asked him, "How long has it been?" "It's been about 3 hours now, sir." 3 hours, meaning it's almost been 3 days inside. Baek Yun-ho's voice sounded grave. Out of 4 people gathered here, only he had personally experienced entering a red gate before. One of the S-ranked hunters representing South Korea, Baek Yun-ho. Even to someone like him, a red gate was a challenging place to survive. With a complicated expression, Baek Yun-ho recalled his experiences. The most terrifying aspect of the red gate is that you're thrown into a completely different world. This was a rare recollection of the past, as told by an S-rank hunter. Naturally, the attention of An Song-min, Ju Sung-chan, and Hyun Ki-cheol focused on him. Baek Yun-ho continued on. Once you cross the gate, the place you end up could be a desert with temperatures soaring past 60 degrees Celsius, or it could be a dense jungle full of poisonous insects and snakes. Or it could be the middle of a snow-covered field where it's so cold that you'd immediately develop frostbites. Gulp. The 3 men simultaneously swallowed their dry saliva. Until you actually enter it, no one knows what awaits them beyond the red gate. So, how can anyone prepare for something like this? It was the same story as today. The gate that looked plain and normal immediately changed its color to red as soon as hunters entered it. Your skin is burning under the hot glares of the sun, or you're tormented by poisonous insects throughout the day, or your flesh rots from the skin-peeling cold. And so, the weakest of your group would start dying first. Oh my God! Hyun Ki-cheol spat out a gasp, as if he could hardly calm himself down. But, even when you're in such a perilous situation, you still have to fight monsters as well. Just from listening to his explanations, they could understand the hopelessness of the current situation. However, the explanation didn't end there. Okay then, let's say that you've somehow adapted to your new environments. From then on, you'll have to procure food. Indeed, one would have to secure enough food to last a few weeks at a minimum, or at worst for several months. Now that would be a huge challenge in and of itself. While stuck in the unforgiving surroundings and suffering from constant hunger, all you can trust is your magic energy compass. The magic energy compass always pointed towards the source of a powerful magic energy emission. The only ways to escape from a red gate were to follow the needle of the magic energy compass, locate the boss and kill it, or wait until the dungeon break occurs. Now, think about waiting for days, weeks, or even months while only staring at that compass. How can anyone not go mad from that? The three men nodded their heads. These three knew that normal people like them would not last one day in places as hostile as those. I said that it's been 3 days already, didn't I? Yes. After hearing Hyun Ki-cheol's reply, Baek Yun-ho formed a distressed expression. Most likely, all hunters ranked C and below have died by now. Kim Cheol was ranked A. However, no matter how good his skills were, it was impossible for a rank A to protect everyone, unless it was a rank S hunter standing by their side, which meant all we can pray for now is the safe return of the higher-ranked hunters. This was the conclusion derived from his personal experience. Th. Most uptod and vels a republished on nrovelbj c/o/m. In Baek Yun-ho's mind, the hunters ranked C and below were already as good as dead by now. Evening. Large chunks of meat were nicely sizzling on top of campfire. You know, this bear meat, it's a bit chewy, but not as bad as I thought. Would you like some more? Agu, thank you kindly. Go Myung-hwan expertly sliced the meat of the ice bear and placed them on a plate pushed forward by Yoon Ki-jung. These two men were the rank C hunters following Jin-woo. Both Park Hui-jin and Han Song-yi were also slowly chewing on the bear meat, although their portions weren't as large as the men's. Uni, please pass me the pepper. What about salt? The seasoning's just about fine, so it's okay. They all looked to more or less have adapted to the living conditions of the dungeon. From the campfire to the blankets wrapped around them, and the tents all set up too. They didn't seem to be in trouble at all. Heck, from a certain perspective, one could say that they looked rather comfy. Instead, Go Myung-hwan scanned the vicinity and spoke up. Don't you think the attacks of the ice bears have lessened lately? Park Hui-jin replied to that question. Well, that's because the team leader has annihilated their numbers, that's why. That man, it's like he has some sort of unresolved vendetta against these bears from his previous life or something. His eyes go all crazy when he spots an ice bear. He's so scary whenever he does that. Really, really scary. By now, Jin-woo's title had been set as the team leader. Park Hui-jin felt Jin-woo's absence and craned her neck a little to scan the surroundings herself. Now that I think about it, where did the team leader disappear to? Yoon Ki-jung had his head almost buried in the plate as he chomped down on the meat, but still raised his head to make his reply. He went out a little while ago, saying that he's going to take a look around here. Huh. Park Hui-jin formed a helpless expression, roaming inside a high-ranked dungeon all alone. Isn't he scared at all? Yoon Ki-jung formed a sly grin. If it's him, it's not going to be a problem. Oh well, he's strong enough to kill ice bears, high-rank monsters, with his bare hands. After all, Go Myung-hwan followed up to Yoon Ki-jung's words and continued on. But by the way, since we're discussing this and all, just how high must your rank be if you can beat up a nonsensically huge monster like that? Stop. Everyone suddenly became utterly silent. They were all curious about the same thing as well. But they dare not say anything, fearful of being kicked out of this place. Let's just finish our meals first. Everyone nodded their heads at Park Hui-jin's suggestion. Jin-woo searched through the forest and made his exit as he brushed past some thickets. It must be somewhere nearby. He could sense the presences of multiple ice bears coming from somewhere. From last night, he had been carefully tracking the ice bears. This was all because he had finally realized that ice bears were coming from the same direction. Jin-woo continued to search before his eyes began glittering dangerously. Found you. He spotted dozens of caverns on a cliff-like wall, lying beyond some bushes, and he sensed presences of more than one life form coming from each of the caves. Hell, he didn't even have to expand his perception here. His eyes could clearly see many ice bears lazily moving in and out of several caves. Just a quick head count, and he found over 30 bears. In other words, this was literally a bear farm. The corners of Jin Woo's lips arched up. He deliberately came here alone to eliminate the possibility of eyewitnesses. This would be the perfect opportunity to utilize his shadow soldiers. Indeed, he had been waiting for a moment like this. Come out. When he inwardly called out, the soldiers wearing black armor soundlessly materialized and surrounded him. You all understand that this is your first sortie, right? What he meant by that was, just as one's impression was decided upon through the first encounter, these guys would have to impress him with their first battle, too. The shadow soldiers stood at attention in eerie silence, with nary a hint of disorder. Jin Woo smirked deeply, seeing them like that. Sniff, sniff. Meanwhile, more and more ice bears began emerging from the caves after detecting Jin Woo's scent. Looks like the other side is done preparing, too. Jin Woo pointed at the ice bears. Go! As soon as his order was issued, the shadow soldiers rushed forward as if they were sliding on ice. The shadow soldiers rapidly closed in on their targets. Unfortunately, the angry swipes of the ice bear's front paws were faster than their movements. Swing! Kwajik! A single hit, and one shadow soldier was obliterated. If it wasn't a shadow underneath the armors, but an actual human being, that attack would surely have ripped him apart into several pieces. Jin Woo frowned deeply. As I thought, did I ask for too much? Whether it was their physical strength or their body sizes, these ice bears were difficult enemies for the shadow soldiers to fight against. However, something quite surprising happened next. Heek! Jin Woo's eyes opened wider. The soldier with its chest torn open by the ice bear's attack suddenly transformed into a clump of black smoke just before it fell to the ground. Poof! The black smoke coagulated in a spot a couple of steps away, and it reverted back to its original appearance. Very good. Jin Woo's expression brightened up. The undeads, he remembered this crucial fact that he had unwittingly forgotten about until now. The ice bear became even more agitated than before after realizing its attack was all for nothing, and it roared out loudly. Roar! And so, as the infantrymen bought time out in front, the magic soldiers standing at the back had completed their spells. Boom! Kaboom! The balls of flames leaving the ends of the magic soldiers' hands exploded here, there, and everywhere. The shadow soldiers swept up and the explosions regenerated right away, but on the other hand, the ice bears could only roll around screaming in sheer pain and agony as their bodies caught on fire. Roar! Growl! Meanwhile, the shadow soldiers didn't waste time and swiftly approached the defenseless bears before stabbing down on them with their blades. Stab! Stay up! One by one, the triumphant and arrogant ice bears were falling at the cooperative tactics of the shadow infantrymen and the magic soldiers. Hiya! Jin Woo continued to spectate on the proceedings with an expression filled with great interest and happiness. The infantrymen and their quick regenerative abilities, the magic soldiers and their superb firepower. The overall combat prowess of the shadow soldiers had far exceeded his initial expectations. Soon, the ice bears were forced into retreat by the might of the shadow soldiers and were pushed back towards the entrance of the caves. He was thinking that the end of the battle was drawing near, but then, roar! Accompanied by the eardrum-shaking roar, a huge shadow slowly emerged from one of the caves. Isn't that? Even Jin Woo's eyes grew extra round and super large. The bear that came out was at least a head taller and double the body size compared to others around it. Roar! Just a single swipe from this huge bear, and multiple soldiers were blown away. Swoosh dash! Kaboom! The regeneration rate of the soldiers could not keep up with the huge ice bear's relentless attacks. Kwajik! Slam! Jin Woo could only leak out a groan after seeing that. So, it's the leader of the pack, is it? He kind of suspected that, since there was a pack, there should be a leader leading it too. However, the B** star turned out to much bigger and stronger than he had anticipated. Kruar! The huge ice bear leader obliterated all the shadow soldiers appearing before it, and approached Jin Woo at a frightening speed. It was at this point that a message popped up in his view. Tearing. Your mana has been depleted and shadow soldiers cannot regenerate anymore. What? He hurriedly checked his MP value, and just as the system had warned him, it was totally gone. MP 0/1860. Once his MP had been drained, the obliterated shadow soldiers didn't regenerate and simply entered back into Jinwoo's shadow. In other words, in order to regenerate the lost soldiers, he needed lots more mana. That D***MN mana. One more reason to enhance his intelligence stat. Then, Jinwoo scratched the side of his head. With the appearance of the Ice Bear leader, the flow of the battle had reversed completely. However, Jinwoo still had plenty of leeway. Since their boss has shown up, this side should also step up. Jinwoo, still standing there with his arms crossed, summoned the boss of the shadow soldiers. Ygritte. One more shadow escaped from Jinwoo's shadow. And from that shadow, a knight wearing a helm with decorative mane rose up soundlessly. Jinwoo pointed forward with his chin. Ygritte bowed to Jinwoo before rushing towards the Ice Bear leader. Tap, 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 tap. Ygritte lightly evaded the Ice Bear leader's front paw and slid between its hind legs. It brushed past the hind legs again, pulled out a dagger, and cut the bear's tendon. Roar. That was the beginning. Ygritte unsheathed his long sword and deftly evaded the bear's enraged attacks, all the while shaving away at the giant monster's body with his blade. Tendons, claws, front paw, legs, torso, bits, and chunks of meat from various areas of the monster sheared off and fell to the ground piece by piece. Huh. Jinwoo could only gasp out in admiration at Ygritte's crafty and elaborate movements. The last place Ygritte hit was the bear's head. Slice. The giant ice bear's head separated from its body and flew away. Before it landed on the ground, though, Ygritte easily snatched it. He trod proudly towards Jinwoo and knelt before him. Plop. And then, he placed the dead bear's head before Jinwoo's feet. It was as if the knight was presenting the spoils of victory to his sovereign. Jinwoo swallowed dry saliva and gazed at the kneeling Ygritte and his bowed head. If Ygritte decided to use his sword from the beginning, would I have been able to defeat him? The Ice Bears, without their leader present, lost all semblance of order and became utterly confused before they were cleanly swept away by the remaining shadow soldiers. That brought about the end to the battles. The result was truly satisfying. Shadow Infantryman LV 2, Shadow Infantryman LV 3, Shadow Magic Soldier LV 2. The levels of the soldiers had risen up nicely. Also, as these shadow soldiers were seen as a part of his skill, even Jinwoo's level had risen up by 3. Most of all, there was another point he found much to his liking. Rise up. Shadow extraction was a success. And that point would be the fact that he could recruit new friends now. Ruhr. From the shadows of several ice bears that Jinwoo had selected, which obviously included the boss bear, black shapes began to slowly rise up. And I thought that armor-wearing bears would pop up. His expectation turned out to be far off the mark, unfortunately. These creatures came with a name tag that said Shadow Beast Soldier. At a casual glance, they kind of resembled bears, but it was still difficult to tell whether these monsters were actually corporeal or not. The creatures continued to pant as the black steam-like fog rose up from their backs. Well, they might not look that great, but they're definitely the shadows of the ice bears. That explosive strength, that destructive power, without a doubt, they would prove to be useful. It happened then. Roar. Jinwoo's ears twitched after hearing the roars of bears coming from the distance. There were several of them, as a matter of fact, meaning this isn't the only bear farm. Huh? It was already getting too late today. So, should he pay a visit there tomorrow? A bright smile formed on Jinwoo's face. You walk. Kyo-heek. His comrades screamed in despair. Kim Cheol's bloodshot eyes shot open wide. No, this can't be. How can this Kim Cheol fail? He was supposed to become the elite of the White Tiger Guild. They even trained him with a special program, so he'd enter the guild's main combat force right away. However, to fail like this, he cannot acknowledge it. While enduring against the biting cold and starvation, they fought off against a group of snowmen. Then, they encountered snow giants. They lost 2 of their numbers, but in the end, emerged victorious against the giants. He thought that the conquest of this dungeon was going according to plan. However, as soon as the desperate struggle against the snow giants ended, the The white phantoms sneak attack from the rear, as if they were waiting for this chance. These wicked, treacherous B***stars had been in hiding, waiting for the raid team to exhaust all their stamina first. What happened next was a one-sided massacre. In the blink of an eye, the hunters were annihilated. "See, Captain." A fallen hunter reached out towards Kim Cheol with his bloodied hand. Kim Cheol could only retreat in faltering steps. Suddenly, a white phantom appeared on top of this fallen hunter. It pulled out a dagger and swiped it under the hunter's neck. "Kekiajak." The white phantom smiled as it sliced the neck off and raised its head to look at Kim Cheol. Kim Cheol could only scream in terror. "Uaya." And then, not even taking one look behind him, he ran straight into the forest. There were ice bears in the forest, compared to snowmen, snow giants, and the white phantoms that appear before him. Those unseen ice bears came across as laughable existences right now. Kim Cheol summoned every ounce of his energy and then ran even harder. The white phantoms glared at the departing back of fleeing Kim Cheol and raised their bow, just as they took aim and got ready to fire. A white phantom with white hair extending all the way down to its waist raised its arm and stopped the attack. The white phantoms lowered their bows. When the long-haired elf signaled the others to follow Kim Cheol, the white phantoms began disappearing from where they stood one by one. Kim Cheol ran out of the thick bushes. Pant, pant, pant. He couldn't catch his breaths at all. Still, when he recalled the derisive smirks on the white phantoms' faces as they massacred the hunters, he felt like peeing himself from fear. His gaze inexplicably lowered to his hands. He couldn't feel much from his frozen hands now. He had lost all feelings in his feet a long time ago. In his current condition, he couldn't even fight properly. If it weren't for this D***MN cold. No, if we weren't starving for several days, we wouldn't have been annihilated like that. In the end, Kim Cheol couldn't acknowledge the failure of the raid team, no, his own failure. Muttering to himself, Kim Cheol raised his head. "By the way, where am I? How deep in the forest is this?" Kim Cheol began scanning the surroundings. Then, he picked up on a faint smell coming from a distance. Kim Cheol began following that smell. It wasn't that far. Once he walked past the trees and escaped out into an open area, he was greeted by an unbelievable spectacle. But how can this be? He found over 20 dead ice bears surrounding a cave entrance. And he thought it was odd to not see a single ice bear when every single tree was marked by them. V//// I16 0V L/B and a slash for the B/S novel reading expiry /N/C. What is going on here? Kim Cheol investigated the conditions of the carcasses. They all showed sword-inflicted wounds. Some of them even had signs of being burned alive. Almost immediately, Kim Cheol thought about Song Jinwoo and the hunters following him. Could they have? Did they do this to these ice bears? No, it couldn't be. Kim Cheol shook his head. The wounds on ice bears were inflicted with long swords. As far as he knew, none of the hunters that went into the forest used a sword. Besides, the two rank E hunters didn't even wield any weapons. If you were to look at the situation objectively, then there was no chance that those people were still alive. In that case, there could be only one explanation. There are white phantoms nearby. His heart fell to the pit of his stomach. Here he was, thinking that he had finally lost those D***nebel white phantoms. Yet they were actually residing close by. Scared stiff now, Kim Cheol held his breath and hurriedly returned to the forest. A little bit further away and a little bit faster than before. He wanted to escape from the territory of the white phantoms as soon as possible. Around the same time, Kruar, an ice bear, cried out and fell to the ground. Shadow soldiers pounced on it and made sure it was no longer able to draw breath. Level up. Very nice. Jinwoo was standing at another bear farm. It had been 5 days since his arrival in this snowy world. He had already cleaned up 3 bear farms in the meantime. Looks like I've killed most of the bears in this forest. His level had risen up quite a bit during this time. It was the same story for his soldiers, too. Initially, they had to attack a bear in a pair to kill it, but now they could eke out a victory in a one-on-one fight. This was very satisfying. Once the stats of the soldiers rose up, Jinwoo assigned them different roles. He could store 30 shadows now. 28 soldiers participated in battles. One went around picking up magic crystals, while the remaining one secured the bear meat. He didn't even have to move a finger, but still ended up with loot from the hunts. But this was proving to be oh so convenient for him. I can't sense the presence of other monsters around here anymore. It seemed that he had more or less took care of all the monsters inside the forest. In that case, should I think about killing the boss? It could be at least a month, or in the worst-case scenario, several months before the dungeon break occurs. He couldn't just sit here and wait for a gate that who knows when it open up. And I still need to kill that insolent little elf ***, too. That measly monster that dared to provoke hunters. Its cocky grin still remained etched in his memory. The scent of meat coming was from somewhere. Sniff, sniff. Kim Cheol sniffed the air with his nose, now super perceptive due to his extreme hunger. The only food he ate since his imprisonment behind the red gate was a single rabbit. Picking up on the smell of food, he reflexively swallowed down his ravenous saliva. Gulp. Perhaps the white phantoms were having a meal nearby. Still, if their numbers are low, then he could subdue them and snatch away their food. His hunger was extreme enough for him to arrive at such a conclusion. Let's go take a look. Kim Cheol walked as silently as possible and cautiously approached the source of the smell. And eventually, he hid inside the bush and discovered the hunters who had left along with Jinwoo. Kim Cheol's eyes grew wider from the revelation. What the hell? The smell of meat was coming from the campfire they had raised. How can they still be alive? Kim Cheol began glaring. He couldn't find one rank hunter among their midst. He must have been killed first after taking a leave like a fool. That would be an obvious thing, wasn't it? However, there was a not-so-obvious spectacle unfolding before his eyes. So, how should he go about explaining the situation, then? Something didn't add up. Wait, hold up. Their attire? Clothes and blankets designed to keep warm, tents, and several pieces of equipment could be seen. They were obviously well prepared. Just how can this be? Kim Cheol was getting flustered even more, but then his gaze had stopped by at a certain place. It was a piece of bread sitting next to sizzling meat, meaning these people even had food ready. His confusion immediately morphed into a rage. These ***. Grit. Kim Cheol began gritting his teeth. They had enough supplies to ensure their continued survival, yet they wanted to hog them all for themselves. If my hands hadn't frozen up, no, if only I wasn't starving, I'd have easily dealt with those ice elves. Realizing that these *** had snatched away the crucial supplies that should have been shared among the rest of the team, he couldn't hold back his fury anymore. Kim Cheol angrily ran out of the bush. You sons of *** cheese. Park Hui-jin quickly shot up from her spot, clearly surprised. Kim Cheol, how did you get here? She found it rather difficult to lie here and say it was good to see him again, because Kim Cheol's glare was full of murderous intent. Indeed, he didn't even bother to mask his hostility. My raid team failed to conquer this dungeon because of the lack of supplies, yet how can all of you find yourselves with this much food and this type of equipment? That is, Park Hui-jin couldn't continue on. If she mentioned Jinwoo here, then Kim Cheol's rage will be directed towards the youth. To her, Jinwoo was her savior. Also, the man always looked at Jinwoo in a suspicious manner. Park Hui-jin shut her mouth immediately. That prompted Kim Cheol's eyes to open even wider in anger. Even I don't think all of you were complicit in this crime. So who had hidden these? Tell me the truth, and I will ignore everything else. A thick vein popped up on Kim Cheol's neck. Tell me who monopolized all the gear and drove his comrades to death. His angry roar reverberated throughout the forest. Kim Cheol was planning to shed blood here if it would appease the sin of betraying his comrades. He'll count to 3. If you don't reveal who it was by then, they'll take it as the sign of all of you being complicit in this matter. Han Sang-yi tugged at Park Hui-jin's sleeve. Yuuni. Park Hui-jin hugged Han Sang-yi. Both Go Myung-hwan and Yun Ki-jung swallowed their saliva as cold sweats soaked their backs. Kim Cheol was a rank A. Even if everyone present worked together, they wouldn't be able to win against him. However, none of them still mentioned Jinwoo's name. 1. Kim Cheol yanked loose his sword from the scabbard attached to his waist. 2. Even then, the lower-ranked hunters showed not one sign of opening their mouths. How dare lower-ranked hunters ignore his order? That point alone stoked the flames of Kim Cheol's anger even higher. Just what these be asterisk stars think of me as. Murderous intent burned brightly in his eyes. Head kill that woman first. Head kill Park Hui-jin before anyone else. The one who betrayed the raid team and left along with these lower-ranked hunters. That's right. She left the raid team because she must have been scheming something. He could only think that way. Kim Cheol stood before Park Hui-jin and spat out the last countdown. 3. Park Hui-jin squeezed her eyes shut. It was then. 4. Pow! Kim Cheol was struck super hard by something in the back of his head and kissed the ground as his entire body slid across the snowy ground for several meters. The eyes of the hunters grew wider. Team leader, Jinwoo had hit Kim Cheol so hard that steam was still rising up from his palm. Jinwoo spoke in a dumbfounded voice. How dare you speak rubbish when it was you who drove your friends to death? Jinwoo Appa. Han Song-yi displayed her happiness as tears formed in her eyes. Team leader. It wasn't as much as Han Song-yi, but still, the two male hunters' expressions also brightened up considerably. Park Hui-jin also breathed a sigh of relief after confirming Jinwoo's face. Unfortunately, Jinwoo didn't have much leeway to respond to their welcomes. SSH. Jinwoo placed his finger on his lips and gestured them to keep quiet. The four people, seemingly getting ready to embrace Jinwoo at any moment now, all froze up like ice statues. Park Hui-jin cautiously asked, W, what's the matter? Jinwoo glared at the fainted Kim Cheol, the Dumby asterisk starred who deserved to be beaten up before turning around. Looks like Kim Cheol brought along unwanted visitors. He sensed countless presences hiding in the forest. Right now wasn't the time to worry about Kim Cheol or Go Cheol or whatever. The real problem lay elsewhere, after all. Shururu. After sensing Jinwoo's glare, the white phantoms undid their stealth and revealed themselves one by one. At a quick count, there were around 20 of them, and among them, Jinwoo's glare was fixed on a long-haired white phantom riding on horseback. That has to be the boss. An overwhelmingly mighty aura was coming from that creature, incomparably heavier than any ice bears and the white phantoms near it. If that guy wasn't the boss of this dungeon, then just who else could be? For the first time in a long while, Jinwoo's skin broke out in goosebumps. Just as Jinwoo was shivering ever so softly from its powerful aura, the boss also recognized Jinwoo's strength in one go. So, there really was one, a truly worthy being among all the human trash. What did you just say? When Jinwoo spat out a response purely out of reflex, the boss displayed an expression of pure surprise. Can you understand our language? Jinwoo was also taken aback. How is it possible to converse with this guy? Not only could he understand what a monster was saying, but he could also actually converse with it, too. A language he couldn't even remember learning before fluently rolled out of his mouth, as if it was his mother tongue. You know how to speak the language of the monsters. Park Hui-jin's expression said her shock was so extreme that she didn't know what to do now. Seeing that, Jinwoo realized that only he could understand what that boss was saying here. Is this because of the system? Like an automatic translation feature? Jinwoo shifted his gaze back to the boss. The boss returned the gaze with great interest. To be able to converse. Very good. There is someone I wanted to introduce to you. The boss pointed at one of the white phantoms standing behind it. I'm sure you're familiar with him already. Jinwoo's glare sharpened instantly. Indeed, he recognized that particular white phantom. That guy was none other than the star that fired an arrow at Han Song-yi before breaking out in a mocking grin. How could he forget that arrogant star's face? That guy was none other than the bee. Star that fired an arrow at Han Song-yi before breaking out in a mocking grin. How could he forget that arrogant bee? Star's face? That exact same smile was still etched on the monster's face. This friend informed me of a truly strong being among the humans. And this friend wishes to challenge you to a duel. So how? Even before the boss finished his words, the night killer Jinwoo flew in a straight line. Stab. and the dagger landed right in the middle of the grinning white phantom's face. Heek! The shocked cry came from the hunters, though Yin Qi-jung hurriedly covered his mouth to stifle the cry he let loose inadvertently just now. Plop! The white phantom collapsed on the ground. Jin Wu extended his hand out, and the night killer buried in the dead elf's face shook around a little before it got pulled out and flew back to him. Jin Wu grasped the returned night killer in reverse grip and lowered his posture. Anything else you want to say? The boss spoke up in admiration. You are indeed very strong. Then it climbed off the horse. However, as if it wasn't planning to fight yet, it didn't draw its weapons nor showed any willingness to engage in battles. However, you know this already, don't you? The boss maintained a leisurely expression and continued to engage him. That you can't fight this number all by yourself. There were over 20 ice elves here. However, their number wasn't important. No, the real danger came from the fact that there was the boss monster among them. The rest of the white phantoms were no match for Jin Wu, who had raised his level as much as he could by hunting every single ice bear in this forest. Exactly like the fool who got killed with a dagger to its face. So, how should I go about killing the boss? While Jin Wu began kicking his brain into gear, the boss continued on. So, I shall make a simple suggestion. A suggestion? That's right. It won't be such a bad suggestion for yourself. Jin Wu was inwardly surprised. It was a well-known fact that humanoid-type monsters possessed intelligence. But he never expected to see a monster trying to negotiate with a human. So, he couldn't help but get curious here. They'll hear it. The boss smiled as if it had expected that answer and opened its mouth. Before that, I want to ask you something. Why are you among these humans when you're not one of them? Jin Wu's expression crumpled deeply. What nonsense are you talking about? Ahaha. It seems that you have no idea. The boss guffawed out loudly before pointing to its temple. Every one of us can hear a certain voice repeating itself in our heads. It tells us to kill humans. However, I can't hear that voice when I'm looking at you. That's what this guy meant? In that case, Jin Wu could think of a reason for that. When the boss says humans, it's probably talking about hunters. The thing was he had changed to this strange something called player through the system during his ordeal in the underground temple. Technically speaking, he was slightly different from other hunters, meaning other awakened human beings. That's why that guy thinks I'm not a human. That made perfect sense. When Jin Wu's expression slowly changed to that of an understanding, the boss nodded its head. There is no need for us to fight each other, and our side does not wish to see needless casualties as well. The boss finally got to the main topic. Hand over the humans behind you. Then, we will guarantee your life. How does my suggestion sound to you? Before he answered, Jin Wu asked back. I want to ask you something too. Fine. Go ahead. Just who are you? Where did you come from? And why do you wish to kill humans? We are. It happened then. The smiling face of the boss suddenly froze stiff. But that odd state lasted only for a brief moment. The boss regained its original expression and continued on. What the hell was that? Jin Wu frowned deeply. The boss repeated itself like an NPC from a game that was asked a question that was not in the script or one that it was not permitted to answer to begin with. Its expression showed how relaxed it was. In other words, it had not recognized how odd its own actions were. The white phantom standing behind didn't display any reaction towards the boss' strange behavior, either. Jin Wu continued to wordlessly observe then, prompting the boss to begin urging him. FLL0W current novels O/N/O/V/3L/B and not C/O/M. Will you accept my suggestion or not? Jin Wu wanted to find out more about the monster's origins and their true intentions, but as it turned out, it was all a waste of time. In that case, the only thing remaining was to choose. But then again, he had made up his mind already a long time ago. I refuse. The corners of Jin Wu's lips arched up. You see, you possess a far too tempting shadow for me to let go. He was planning to kill the boss and take away its shadow. And there was no way he'd change his mind now when he was constantly thinking about how to carry the plan out ever since the boss made its entrance. Are you planning to fight my soldiers all by yourself? Do you truly believe that you can overcome the disadvantages in numbers all alone? Jin Wu smirked derisively. Soldiers, was it? You think you're the only one? I've got them too. He summoned his shadows. According to his wishes, the soldiers hiding in Jin Wu's shadow all revealed themselves in the blink of an eye right behind him. Yuwa! Yuwak! Again, the cry came from the hunters this time as well. Yun Kijun cried out in fright as the shadow of the ice bear, the shadow beast soldier, suddenly materialized right next to him, and he fell hard on his asterisk S. When Jin Wu took a glance at the pale faces of the surviving raid team, he felt that it was a bit regretful, but this was an emergency situation. There was no time to explain things to them here. Well, I wouldn't explain things to them even if this wasn't an emergency, though. After summoning 29 shadow soldiers, Jin Wu stood before them and glared at the boss. So who's disadvantaged now? Finally, the boss displayed its hostility. You seem to know some petty tricks, don't you? Fine. If it's your wish, I shall grant your death. The boss unsheathed 2 daggers from his sides. This was what Jin Wu wanted as well. He grasped the Night Killer in his right hand, while the left grasped the poison fang of Kasaka as he got ready for battle. Petty tricks, is it? The boss had a point there. Jin Wu might hold an advantage in numbers, but his army was slightly lacking if he wanted to hunt the boss down. Jin Wu knew this very well. The boss' self-confidence could have come from this fact. Indeed, he now needed more comrades. Powerful comrades. If it's a powerful comrade, then there was one candidate here. Jin Wu sneaked a glance to his side. The still unconscious Kim Cheol was lying there, unmoving. Attack! When the boss issued the order, the white phantoms pulled on their bowstrings. Bears! Jin Wu placed the beast soldiers at the front. Stab! 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 Krur! The beast soldiers with arrows sticking out of their bodies all roared out in anger. Before the white phantoms could knock the next volley of arrows, the infantrymen rushed forward. The magic soldiers also began chanting their spells. Meanwhile, Jin Wu's eyes gleamed dangerously. You're mine. Jin Wu deliberately pushed Kim Cheol's long sword towards its owner with his heel, before pouncing forward himself as well. His sight was fixed solely on the boss of the White Phantoms. The boss, too, was waiting for Jin Wu's arrival. Soon, sparks endlessly flew as the 4 daggers wielded by 2 creatures clashed in midair. Clang! 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 At the same time, the Shadow Soldiers and White Phantoms also slammed into each other as well. Go Myung-hwan looked at Park Hui-jin next to him. Shouldn't we lend assistance here? Park Hui-jin shook her head. This isn't a fight where we can butt in, you know? This was a battle where huge black monsters were swinging their giant claws. The destroyed black soldiers were regenerating to their original state in the blink of an eye, and the gleaming blades and the arrows fired from the upper-rank monsters, White Phantoms, were chaotically flying around in the snowy field. So, what can a rank B or C do in this place? Indeed, the only thing they were permitted to do here was to pray. Park Hui-jin could only stare at Jin Wu with a tight chest as he fought the long-haired White Phantom. Kuhyuk! Jin Wu gasped out. As expected of a boss from the high-ranking dungeon, the fight looked to be even from the side, but Jin Wu was getting cut and sliced constantly all over his body. Would he be able to last 3 minutes at this rate? His MP was also rapidly depleting away as his soldiers constantly regenerated. Finally, the magic soldiers managed to finish their chants. A ball of flames larger than a volleyball flew in the midst of the White Phantoms. Kaboom! That was the power of the leveled-up magic soldiers in full display. Awakened by the resounding eardrum-shaking explosion, Kim Cheol regained his consciousness and opened his eyes. Kim Cheol raised his head to look. Clang! Clang! Pow dash! His blurry vision picked up on the sight of White Phantoms fighting against the unknown black soldiers. What the hell is going on here? He couldn't figure out what happened while he blacked out, but at least he knew very well why he was lying on the ground like this. The hand that slapped him in the back of his head, and the voice that came from behind him. That voice definitely belonged to Song Jin Wu. Now that he had regained his bearing, The sense of shame and rage bubbled over like crazy, and the ends of his fingertips trembled. How fortunate that he could feel the hilt of his sword. If he was surrounded by the white phantoms, then he'd not get out of here alive. In that case, he must. I'll kill that be asterisk starred Song Jin-woo with my own hands. His maddened eyes finally spotted the back of Song Jin-woo. There he was. He was too busy fighting a white phantom and wasn't paying any attention to his rear. This was his chance. Kim Cheol stood up right away, and then ran. Yuaha. After sensing Kim Cheol running towards him, Jin-woo laughed out inwardly in elation. Right if it's you. Kim Cheol ran with all his might, and after taking aim at Jin-woo's neck, swung the sword hard. Die! In front, the boss. From behind, Kim Cheol. Even though he was stuck in a seemingly dangerous situation, Jin-woo still managed to shout out, Ygritte! As if had been waiting for that call, Ygritte jumped out from his shadow immediately and easily deflected Kim Cheol's sword. Clang! No! Kim Cheol's bloodshot eyes opened wider. However, even before he could say anything, Ygritte's sword pierced deeply into his chest. The blade ran straight through his chest and emerged from his back. Kyo-heek! Jin-woo quickly took several steps back. I knew Kim Cheol would act this way. This fool was someone who didn't think about anything in depth and only acted according to his emotions. They had been together only for a short while, but that was enough for Jin-woo to figure this guy out. Kim Cheol glared at Jin-woo. You. And with that, Kim Cheol breathed his last. As Ygritte stepped up to delay the boss, Jin-woo issued an order to the shadow of the dead Kim Cheol. Rise up. When that happened, Yuawa dash. Accompanied by a heavy, somber cry, a huge hand emerged from the shadow. There you go. Jin-woo clenched his fist tightly. The final piece of this puzzle called the boss raid had fallen into its place. The Black Knight that emerged from Kim Cheol's shadow was far bigger and sturdier than the original version, and it even carried a huge war hammer in one hand as well. The other hand held a shield as tall as a grown man, and the overall impression this guy gave off was truly oppressive and threatening. Kim Cheol was a muscular man, but this shadow is just too over the top. Even though it was an urgent situation, Jin-woo couldn't help but leak out a gasp of admiration. Please set the soldier's name. All right, the name. Jin-woo sneaked a glance to his side. Perhaps finding the battle quite tough, Ygritte was having a hard time right now, being pushed around by the boss. Currently, he was barely buying enough time by relying on his cheat-like regenerative ability. Slice! Ygritte's arm was sliced off then. I don't have much time to waste here. A name, was it? Should he go with whatever? Maybe Kim Cheol? Jin-woo immediately shook his head. To call an undead with a name it used while it was still alive, that just didn't sit well with him. Right, his name was Kim Cheol. Cheol, so iron it is. TL. Cheol is a Korean word for iron. The name had been decided. As soon as Jin-woo thought of that name, it was bestowed on the newly birthed Shadow Knight. Iron Elvion. Knight grade. A knight grade. It was the same grade as Ygritte, but again, there was no time to celebrate. I can't waste any more time than this. Jin-woo pointed to the boss. Iron. Iron's large frame lumbered forward quite heavily like a mountain. Thud, thud, thud. Jin-woo really liked the new guy's huge frame, but he couldn't help but worry whether that lumbering speed could even catch up to the agile boss or not. Fortunately, such a worry was put to bed really fast. Iron leaned back and roared out loudly. Wooer, what was that? Just as Jin-woo was getting flustered, several messages popped up in his view. Tearing. Iron has used skill. Shout of provocation. The owner of the dungeon has fallen into an aggroed state. An aggro skill. Kim Cheol was actually a rank A tanker. So, quite obviously, he possessed a high-level aggro skill, and the Shadow Knight extracted from his shadow, Iron, had retained that skill in full and was able to use it no problem. The head of the boss swiveled towards Iron. Although it could have chosen to finish Ygritte off right in front of its eyes, the boss simply pounced on Iron as if it had been hypnotized by a ghost or some such. Iron used the skill reinforcement and endured the sharp dagger attacks of the boss digging into his body. Nice! Jin-woo nodded his head in approval. In the meantime, Ygritte's sliced arm regenerated to full. Shururu. The black smoke began oozing out from the stump and coagulated to form new arm. Meanwhile, the boss was still preoccupied with iron. And seizing this chance, Jinwoo and Ygritte's combined assault began on the boss. Park Hwi-jin became utterly speechless as the unbelievable spectacle unfolded right before her eyes. What she was seeing right now proved to be too unrealistic, too outlandish. She didn't even want to ask for clarification. Not anymore. From her side, Han Song-yi asked her with a timid voice. Uni. Park Hwi-jin responded belatedly to her. Do all fights of hunters look like that? She must have been frightened silly, because Han Song-yi's voice was trembling noticeably. Park Hwi-jin replied to her, sounding helpless as well. That if that were the case, then I'd never have earned my license, you know. Go Myung-hwan asked next, looking utterly dazed out of his mind. Could it be that we were dreaming right now? If this was indeed a dream, then it must have been a nightmare instead. Park Hwi-jin looked back at the battlefield where the monsters and the black somethings were having a chaotic throwdown and spat out a long sigh. At the same time, a new worry formed in her head. When we get out of here, without a doubt. There was no doubt that, as a survivor, Shebi asked several uncomfortable questions. How should she go about explaining what she was seeing here? Then, Park Hwi-jin couldn't even begin to fathom just where she'd start her explanations on what happened inside the Red Gate, and in particular, the man named Song Jinwoo, after she raised that point to everyone. But still, Yoon Ki-jung, sitting on the ground and shaking like a leaf, spoke with some difficulty. Isn't it an incredible thing that we can actually worry about what'll happen to us once we get out of here? The hunters all nodded their heads in unison. This was an upper-rank dungeon. Not only that, a red gate too. Even though they found themselves in such a dangerous area, they were now worrying about the matters that would take place outside. This was all due to the power of one man. Park Hwi-jin's gaze was directed to Jinwoo. Mr. Song Jinwoo. Her feelings had moved way past shock and gratefulness, and she was beginning to feel a sense of awe towards him now. Stab. The poison fang of Kasaka stabbed into the boss' shoulder. Effect. Paralysis has been activated. The effect has been cancelled due to the high resistance of the target. Effect. Bleeding has been activated. With the increased levels of the enemies had been facing lately, the additional effects of the poison fang of Kasaka failed to activate properly more often than not. Still, inflicting injuries was a good thing in a fight. The boss' agile movements were being hampered gradually due to the increasing number of wounds being inflicted on its body. Kwahahak. The smile had disappeared from the boss' face a long time ago. The boss had been dodging the combined attacks of Jinwoo, Ygritte, and Iron rather freely until then, but now it was quite obviously running out of breath. Just a little bit more. Iron suddenly bear-hugged the boss. Now, when Jinwoo gave the signal, Ygritte rapidly retreated. Jinwoo too quickly stepped back. The boss' eyes widened in confusion. What are you trying? Before he could finish, the magic soldiers completed the explosion spells, and they rained down on Iron's position. Quaboom! Boom! Kyohik! For the first time ever, the boss spat out a sharp cry of pain. The B** star twisted its body around, and Iron's arms fell off. Grit! The boss enraged. Murderous eyes were now firmly fixed on Jinwoo. Kwahahahak! Dash! Seeing this, Jinwoo could only feel admiration towards the boss once more. Even with such a heavy wound, it can still exhibit that much strength, as expected of a high-level dungeon's boss. Unfortunately for it, the scale had tilted away from it some time ago. Dagger throw. Just like what he did to that arrogant white phantom, Jinwoo threw the Night Killer at the boss, and added even more momentum by using the ruler's reach. Shuck dash. The dagger flew to its target in the blink of an eye. Cook. The boss realized that it was difficult to dodge the throw, so it used its own dagger to deflect Jinwoo's blade. Crack. The Night Killer flew at such a frightening speed that the boss dagger actually cracked from the impact force. And at the same time, Jinwoo used stealth and dash skills to close the distance to the boss, and stabbed the poison fang of Kasaka deeply into the B** star's waist. Stab. The boss' eyes widened considerably. Sourk of this Connie /NT in /O/V/ buy-in. However, the boss still managed to grab Jin Woo's wrist, even in the midst of all this. It was not that hard to see the boss' desire to not go down without a fight from its crazed eyes. Kawak. Just as the boss raised its dagger above its head to stab at Jin Woo, Jin Woo simply smirked. At the same time, a huge war hammer slammed into the head of the boss. Slam! The boss' face crashed into the snowy ground. Behind the boss, Iron was raising his hammer up high again, both his arms already fully regenerated. The huge hammer flew down again. Swish dash. Splat. Ygritte was getting ready to attack, but then sheathed his sword back into the scabbard attached to his waist. Jin Woo also stored his daggers back inside the inventory, and the expected messages popped up right away. You've killed the owner of this dungeon. Level up. Phew, it's finally over. Jin Woo sighed grandly in relief. What a hard-fought victory this was. He was about to take a breather, but then saw Iron and his eyes went extra round in surprise. Hey, you can stop now. Jin Woo hurriedly stopped Iron. He was about to smash down with his hammer again, but finally stayed his hands. Perhaps it resembled the original too much, because the guy turned out to be a bit simple in the head like the original. Meanwhile, the boss corpse had been pummeled into a meat paste already. However, its shadow isn't affected, so it's fine. Jin Woo smirked deeply. Finally, the reward for this incredibly hard battle, the one head been salivating over, was right by his feet, waiting to be taken. Jin Woo issued his order. Rise up. It was now 3 a.m. The facial expressions of 4 men waiting around the red gate were, as expected, not so good. Unable to endure any longer, Hyun Ki-cheol finally opened his mouth. Guildmaster, we'll remain here and wait. So how about going home first, sir? My guild members are trapped in there, so how can I even think about going home to relax now? Baek Yun-ho was resolute in his decision. Indeed, that wasn't something the leader of a large guild, not to mention as a currently active rank as hunter, should entertain under this sort of situation. It was here that on Song Min's eye widened. Huh, look, the red gate. Hyun Ki-cheol and Ju Sung-chan also discovered an oddity with the red gate. The red gate is opening up. The dungeon's been cleared. There are people coming out. Baek Yun-ho clenched his fists tightly. That Kim Cheol, did he manage to pull it off? Everyone waiting there hurriedly rushed towards the front of the gate. Baek Yun-ho, unable to hide his excitement, began searching for the leader of this team, Kim Cheol. However, even though all of the survivors came out, the big guy couldn't be seen. This can't be right. The one who had been insisting on believing in Kim Cheol, Ju Sung-chan's previously confident attitude, was gone now, and his expression was getting warped as well. Park Hui-jin Hunternim, Go Myung-hwan, Yin Ki-jung Hunternim, Song Jin-woo Hunternim. After spotting Jin Woo walking along with Han Song-yi right behind the others, On Song-min's face was quickly filled up with a huge smile. I thought as much. It was such a noticeable contrast from the face of Ju Sung-chan. However, his smile also faded away quickly when 5 people, including Song Jin-woo, walked out from the gate. The portal to another world slowly disappeared from their view. It can't be. Is this everyone? Jin-woo nodded his head, looking rather exhausted. Hyun Ki-cheol had asked that question, and after getting that silent answer, his expression hardened instantly. How can this be? Hyun Ki-cheol's eyes teared up, and he reluctantly began crossing out the names of the deceased off the member list. This was a terrible job, but it had to be done regardless. Baek Yun-ho had been staring at this in a daze, before gasping out in sheer shock and disbelief. Only the lower-ranked hunters returned. Never mind the A rank. Only a single rank B survived? Such a thing should not happen. Just what on earth happened inside that dungeon? Let's go. They'll take you home. Jin-woo was about to lead Han Song-yi and leave the location, but Baek Yun-ho reached out and grabbed his wrist first. Excuse me. Wait. Slap. Jin-woo fiercely shook off that hand. Baek Yun-ho's eyes sharpened immediately. We need to talk for a second here. Jin-woo turned around. I'm too tired. If you have questions, you should ask your own guild members. Baek Yun-ho couldn't hold back and revealed his identity. Baek Yun-ho, the guild master of the White Tiger. Jin Woo's eyes remained cold. However, so what? Being on the receiving end of Jin Woo's cold response, Baek Yun-ho's eyes suddenly transformed to that of a monster's. No, they completely resembled a beast now instead. We lost 9 guild members through this incident. As the master, I have the right to ask you a couple of questions regarding this matter. This was no longer a request. It was an order, or even a threat. Didn't matter what anyone thought his words. He was not planning to let Jin Woo go that easily here. But then, Jin Woo too angrily glared back. He was not being cowered by the intense hostile aura oozing out in full force from the rank S hunter, Baek Yun-ho. I rescued 3 of your people. If you're really their leader, shouldn't you be saying thanks to me first? It was Baek Yun-ho who had to withdraw his threatening aura first, as he was bombarded with this incredible pressure emanating from Jin Woo. Besides that, what he said was logical as well. Baek Yun-ho couldn't argue against the point raised. That I apologize. Baek Yun-ho lowered his head. Seeing this, Jin Woo turned around once more to leave. Han Song-yi, let's get going. Okay. Han Song-yi carefully studied the mood of this place and followed after Jin Woo. The 2 of them got on the van and not too long after left the location. This doesn't make any sense. Baek Yun-ho's thoughts were now in complete disarray. He quickly ran towards the sole surviving upper-rank hunter, Park Hui-jin. Excuse me, Mississippi Park Hui-jin. She had been trying to warm herself up with a cup of hot tea Hyun Ki-cheol had handed over. She raised her head to meet Baek Yun-ho's gaze. What was the matter with that guy? Why was he so downbeat like that? Indeed, that man had probably gone through an unimaginable hell and finally managed to escape from the Red Gate. Yet why was his attitude so murderous? Park Hui-jin shook her head, displaying her own confusion. I also don't know, sir. After killing the boss, he stood in front of the dead body and shouted something out 3 times, and after that he's been like that. He was okay until then. Park Hui-jin looked at Go Myung-hwan and Yun Ki-jung. The 2 men nodded their heads simultaneously. What a strange man. Baek Yun-ho muttered to himself as he stared helplessly at the street Jin Woo had disappeared in. On Song-min saw the state his boss was in and became incredibly nervous as if he had done something wrong instead. My apologies, Guildmaster. I'm sure he's like that because he's just exhausted. He's not a bad person, I assure you. At least, I believe he's not. No, that's not the problem. Pardon me? Baek Yun-ho turned around to stare squarely at On Song-min. Why haven't you scouted that man already? On Song-min couldn't hide his fluster. But it wasn't strong enough to best the fluster Baek Yun-ho had felt just now. Against me. Baek Yun-ho recalled Jin Woo's fierce glare and could only nervously swallow his dry saliva. Gulp. Abruptly, he thought that, were he to fight that man, he'd have to resolve himself to lose an arm or 2. Maybe even worse than that. Quickly figuring out what Baek Yun-ho meant, On Song-min hurriedly replied, We're doing our very best, sir. That is clearly not enough. Baek Yun-ho's eyes began to sparkle rather dangerously. Song Jin Woo. Indeed, Chief, On's discerning eyes were on the money again. From today onwards, you'll receive all the resources you need. You must bring that man into our guild, no matter what. On the way home, Virum, Jin Woo was busy licking his lips in unhappiness as he drove the van. TSK. Was it because the gap between his stat values and the extraction targets were too great? What a disappointment it was, but his extraction attempts ended in failure. What a waste, but there's nothing I can do now. He'd still be able to kill a boss from a high-ranking dungeon in the future. What's important now was to quickly raise his skill levels high enough so that He'd not miss out on another chance. Leveling up. Now that was something Jin Woo excelled in. And also, Jin Woo's hand left the steering wheel for a little while, as a dagger with an elegant, flowing, arched blade appeared in his grip. Item, Baruka's dagger. Rarity, A. Type, dagger. A dagger used by the great warrior Baruka. Weight reduction magic has been applied to it, allowing the wielder's movements to become even more agile than before. Attack, plus 110. Agility, plus 10. Well, He didn't walk away completely empty-handed. This was the dagger the boss had been using. There were two, but one of them was broken, so he threw that away and took the remaining dagger. The Baruka's dagger, eh? Not only did it feature high attacking power, but it also raised his agility, too. On that front alone, there was no need to compare it to Night Killer, a dagger ranked B he paid handsomely for, never mind the rank C Poison Fong of Kasaka. FLL0W current novels O/N/V/3L/B and .C/O/M. Its rarity alone was at A2. This was probably one of the best weapons to replace the Poison Fong of Kasaka that had been losing its effectiveness lately. I like the way it feels in my hand, too. While he was mulling over the things that happened inside the Red Gate, they had arrived before Han Song-yi's home. Screech. She had been sitting in the passenger seat without saying a word, as if she wasn't even there in the first place. As soon as the van came to a stop, she climbed out of the seat and bowed her head. Drive safely. I will. Good night. Han Song-yi turned around to leave. Seeing her slumped shoulders and powerless gait, it seemed that the original goal of this trip had been met, one way or the other. Well, although things did get a lot complicated, I was trying to change her mind anyway. It was rather likely that she wouldn't try to become a hunter in the future. It'd be the same story for anybody if their first dungeon experience just so happened to be a Red Gate. He nodded his head in satisfaction and was about to start the van again, but then the passenger side door was abruptly opened from the outside. Jin-Woo shifted his gaze. Han Song-yi had returned to the van and was holding on to the door. What's the matter with her? His curiosity only lasted for a little while. Han Song-yi bowed her head deeply again, this time looking much calmer than before. Thank you for everything, Appa. He only now realized that, from some time ago, the honorific she used to address him changed from Juicy to Appa. Sure thing. Don't mention it. Excuse me. Tomorrow. No, see you later. Later? Before he could ask her for clarification, Han Song-yi hurriedly ran away. After her back disappeared from his view, did he realize what she was talking about. From today onwards, he'd be teaming up with Jin-Ho again to mop up the rest of the raids. Han Song-yi was a raid team member, so of course, they'd see each other again later on. So she meant that, huh? What a relief that was, though. His plan would have been affected pretty badly if Han Song-yi refused to come out of her house because of the trauma from this incident. This worked out for the best, and now he would use his shadow soldiers to clear out the rank C dungeons even faster than before. He felt utterly confident of clearing up the remaining raids in the shortest time possible. Also, he couldn't wait to see how Jin-Ho would react after witnessing his shadow soldiers in action, too. The reactions of that man, Yin Ki-jung, were really priceless, weren't they? Jin-Woo chuckled softly and leisurely turned the steering wheel. The next morning, yawn. Jin-Woo yawned grandly as he stepped out of the apartment's foyer. He only closed his eyes for a bit, but hell, it was time to meet up with Jin-Ho already. Hyung-nim, good morning. He heard the familiar, energetic voice greeting him. Jin-Ho was already here, waiting. You don't even have a car. So how did you get here? The raid team's favorite ride. Mr. Van had been commandeered by Jin-Woo last night and was currently parked neatly in the apartment's parking lot nearby. I caught a taxi, Hyung-nim. Taxi? And here he was, thinking you're going to fetch the kid instead. Oh no, it's fine, Hyung-nim. I'm the one asking for your help. So it's only right that I'm the one driving you around, at least. Jin-Ho grinned happily and replied. This morning started like any other. However, Jin-Ho discovered something new, and that was a cylindrical something held in Jin-Woo's hand. Jin-Ho's curiosity piqued in an instant. Hyung-nim, what is that? This? Jin-Woo grinned mysteriously. I'm going to use it inside the dungeon today. Heek. Suddenly, the chill invaded Jin-Ho's back. Is it a weapon he's going to use inside the dungeon? Hyung-nim had already displayed many extraordinary things before. Just what kind of a horrifying weapon was he bringing to a dungeon today, then? Jin-Ho was getting pretty psyched up already. Gulp. Jin-Ho swallowed his dry saliva and raised his head after finally settling his mind. Hyung-nim, let's get going. Hold on. Jin-Woo pulled out his phone and dialed someone. There's someone we should take along as well. Excuse me? Who? Hey, Songy. It's me. Meet us at the parking lot. We'll go to the gate together. Songy. Could it be that Songy? As soon as Jin-woo ended the call, Yoo Jin-ho asked him, Hyung-nim, the person you want to take with us, is she that high schooler in our team? Jin-woo nodded his head. Han Song-yi lived near here, and their destination was the same, so there wasn't any reason to go there separately. Now, was there? Unfortunately, Yoo Jin-ho didn't see it that way. Han Song-yi, the rather cute high school girl with her hair tied up in a bun. He already knows her number and can talk to her in such a friendly manner, too. Could Hyung-nim and her have formed a much deeper relationship than meets the eye? For sure, Hyung-nim was a cool guy even from another man's perspective, especially when he uses nothing but a dagger to totally rip apart monster. While Hyung-nim wouldn't be interested at all, it'd not be a strange thing for an impressionable schoolgirl to fall for a man like that. Yoo Jin-ho nodded his head. If this was the case, then there was something he had to make sure right away. Hyung-nim, should I call Miss Han's sister-in-law from now on? Did this guy fall off the bed and hit his head or something? Jin-woo's crumpled expression was implicitly implying that. Even if Yoo Jin-ho was not too quick on the uptake, he should still be able to figure that one out pretty easily. You two aren't dating? She's a friend of my little sister. Oh, so that's what happened. Yoo Jin-ho finally understood the situation. He didn't even know what was going on, yet he was thinking of calling that girl his sister-in-law. His face reddened up considerably. Soon enough, Han Song-yi came to the parking lot. Not only that, she was noticeably better dressed than how she was usually. Seeing this, Yoo Jin-ho grinned slightly. Yup, she's definitely a teen girl. Want to look nice in front of the brother of her friend and all. As the leader of the raid team, he was thinking of praising the fellow raid team member's choice of wardrobe, but then Jin-woo greeted her first. Did you get some sleep? In that instant, Yoo Jin-ho's expression froze stiff. Han Song-yi smiled and shook her head. I couldn't catch a wink. I'm sure you're still exhausted, so get some rest in the van. Listening to the two young people's conversation, the thought process of Yoo Jin-ho became more and more messed up. Han Song-yi asked Jin-woo this time. What about you, Appa? Did you get some sleep? Well, only for a little bit. It was already 4 a.m. by the time I got back home, anyway. Well, true that. Night? Couldn't catch a wink. Still exhausted? 4 a.m. by the time he got back home? Just as Yoo Jin-ho's panic state was morphing into a full-blown freak-out, Jin-woo stopped walking towards the van and looked back at him. What are you doing, Yoo Jin-ho? Hyung-nim. Well, the thing is, Miss Han Song-yi is still a minor, Hyung-nim. Okay, so? Never mind, Hyung-nim. Truly now, Hyung-nim was a man among men. Yoo Jin-ho was deeply impressed by Jin-woo, who didn't care about the glares of the public and thought that. Indeed, he's extraordinary. He also began to reflect on his foolish ways of trying to apply the standards of the regular people on Hyung-nim. Around the same time, inside the private conference room of the White Tiger Guild. That's everything I saw. Park Hui-jin finished her report. Although Baek Yun-ho tried to dissuade her, saying that she should rest up first, she readily agreed to participate in the debriefing right away. She added that her stay over there was comfortable, comparatively speaking. The two men who sat through the debriefing, the guild master Baek Yun-ho and the section chief on Song-min, were left utterly speechless. The agent in charge of yesterday's disastrous training, Hyun Ki-chul, was not present, currently in the Hunters Association to discuss how to handle the fallout from this incident. So, there were only 3 people inside this conference room. On Song-min was the first one to break the silence. Everything you told us, are they all true? You can speak to Go Myung-hwan and Yoon Ki-jung. They will corroborate everything I've said. Those 2 hunters went home right away, saying they missed their families. Park Hui-jin was 100% certain that her testimony and theirs would not be any different. Well, I only described the things I saw after all, such as when that man wasn't around, shed here the pitiful screams of ice bears every now and then coming from the forest some distance away, or such as when he'd suddenly wake up in the middle of the night to perform push-ups while everyone was fast asleep. She didn't bother to talk about things other hunters might have experienced, those that she didn't get to see. On On Song-min spat out a gasp that could either be a sigh or a groan. Song Jinwoo knocked out cold a rank A hunter in one hit. He could use separate space magic freely, and most important of all, he controlled dozens of summoned creatures. Every one of those were unbelievable things to swallow. And even more shocking news than that was, he had cleared the upper rank dungeon almost all by himself. Baek Yun-ho broke his silence and said that sentence, word by word, syllable by syllable. He was qualified to say that because he was an S rank. Now that is the most unbelievable thing out of all of them. Sure, the summoned creatures fought alongside him, but then again, those summons weren't his comrades to begin with. No, they were simply a part of Song Jinwoo Hunter's skill. In other words, it was pretty much the same thing as Song Jinwoo clearing the dungeon alone. Even if you're a really high-ranked hunter, clearing an upper-ranked dungeon by yourself is incredibly difficult. Not only that, it was a red gate to boot. What if it was Baek Yun-ho? Perhaps he might be able to solo a rank B red gate, albeit just barely. This feat was only achievable because Hunter Song Jinwoo was capable of summoning and controlling dozens of summons. On Song-min remained stupefied as he spoke up. There's no doubt that he's a reawakened possessing an extremely rare skill. Baek Yun-ho agreed. It is already rare to see a hunter controlling a summoned creature, but he can control several tens of them. While working as the S-rank hunter, Baek Yun-ho had met countless other capable hunters, and had talked to a lot of them too. But he had never, ever heard of such a skill before. A reawakened possessing a rare skill that's on another dimension compared to every other rare skill. Baek Yun-ho expressed his admiration once more. It was here that on Song-min thought a question. If we were to evaluate Mr. Song Jinwoo's ability in monetary terms, how much could it possibly be? Even Baek Yun-ho couldn't answer that. However, without a doubt, it didn't matter what Song Jinwoo's current value was. As soon as he went through the reassignment test, his value would shoot up several times more. They needed to sign him up before that happened. The White Tiger Guild had already lost a rank A and several rank BS through this incident. If they failed to secure the winning lottery ticket called Song Jinwoo at this time, then the losses incurred would be rather too severe to just write them off. I shall place my full trust in you, Chief On. Baek Yun-ho's eyes gleamed in the light of faith. On Song-min formed a dignified expression. It was then. The gazes of Baek Yun-ho and On Song-min were directed to Park Hwi-jin. She had her hand raised slightly. Baek Yun-ho asked her, "Is there something you'd like to ask us?" Succeeding in her mission to draw the attention of the two men, she lowered her hand and spoke. "Please, allow me to participate." "In what?" "The recruiting of the raid team leader Song Jinwoo Hunternim." Baek Yun-ho and On Song-min exchanged glances for a bit before looking back at her. The person in charge of scouting and recruitment, On Song-min, tilted his head. "But why would Park Hwi-jin Hunternim? I've spent the most amount of time with Song Jinwoo Hunternim out of everyone in the White Tiger Guild, so surely my familiarity with him would prove to be useful in reeling him in." It had been 6 hours in reality, but inside the Red Gate it was almost a week. Park Hwi-jin's suggestion sounded logical from Baek Yun-ho's and On Song-min's point of view. On top of this, Park Hwi-jin was a beauty as well. One could say that the power of a beautiful face was absolute when seducing another person. Sensing that the thoughts of the guild master and the section chief had been swayed, Park Hwi-jin finally got to the main topic. "However, I have a condition." "And what could that be?" "When Song Jinwoo Hunternim signs up with our guild, please place me in his raid team, no questions asked.